Right. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. And today I have a very special guest. My guest goes by the name Jon Jon Lannen, the boy who was so nice they named him twice. I just wanted to say that, to be honest. Now, Jon Jon Lannen is a podcaster, a YouTuber, a children's book author, a Twitch streamer, although that's mostly for his podcast, but still I count that Twitch streamer, and a TV presenter hailing all the way from the United States of America. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi! Oh my God, I'm so good, Christian. I'm so thrilled to be on this show. Thank you again for having me. This is wicked cool. Look, we're going global over here. We're all over the world.
It is pretty amazing, actually, to be honest, because so far I've interviewed people in, let's see, South Africa, Estonia, Germany, Holland, and America. We're international, baby, like Pitbull.
I want to see a guest from Azerbaijan, mainly because I love saying that country's name. Azerbaijan.
It's possible. I actually do have a Russian guest coming up soon, so you never know. It's possible.
Oh, da.
Can you speak? I know. Okay, before I get into proper questions, I know that you can speak a little bit of or you would. No, okay. So I guess my first question, is you were born in America, but your family is German. Is that correct?
So actually, I was born and raised in Germany, and my mom is American and my dad is Turkish. So I actually have no German blood, technically speaking, but I speak fluent German, and most of my biological father's relatives married into Germans. So a lot of my cousins are very blonde, German-looking children. And my siblings are much more olive tone. They really have that Turkish complexion. And then we moved here when I was 9, 10 years old, and now I'm here. Now I have a new accent, I suppose.
I feel bad because you have explained this before to me, and for those who don't know, listening on on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever else you consume the Christian Reeve Podcast, me and Jon Jon have actually collabed before. We did a wrestling podcast on Jon Jon's podcast. We also did a show. So basically, Jon Jon does like this variety show, I guess you could say, on his podcast, sometimes on Twitch. And he invited me very graciously to do sort of an acting piece, or to do some acting pieces on there. And he showcased a bunch of other creators and put it all together, and it made for a good show. So we've done some stuff together, basically, is my point. And I remember possibly in that podcast, you said about being the connection to Germany. And I guess my memory is all over the place, because sometimes I have a really good memory and sometimes it's really bad. And I always feel bad because it's like, I'm a good guy. I will care. I'll make the effort for you as a friend. But at the same time, it's like, it's especially bad if I have like a girlfriend or something and I forget something and they're like, how could you forget? And it's like, it's not you. It's just that I'm terrible memory.
I totally hear that. And think about it. How many people you interact with all around the world, different stories. So you are all good, not to worry. I'm the same way with memory. I'm like, I think I attribute it to my OCD and ADD, very hyperactive brain. It's like, if someone talks for a couple of minutes, I might only be able to answer one or two things. I'm like, my brain went about 5 other places. So I'm totally with you on the memory piece.
You just mentioned there, was that like a joke, or do you actually have ADD or something like that? Is that a real thing that you have?
Yeah, true story. I have ADD. I'm very open about my mental illness and mental health. I also have obsessive compulsive disorder. And those two things really lend itself really well for being a neurotic creator. But there are some struggles with that, right? But yeah, no, I struggle with OCD and ADD every single day of my life. But that's why I think creating is so great for me. I'm able to jump into all of those different avenues, not get bored with a certain thing. And when I do, I shift over here, but it's really interesting because of the combination of ADD and OCD, right? You lose focus quickly, but OCD really hyper focuses you on a specific thing, very compulsive, right? So it's really interesting. I go really hard on all of my things and move along, which is why I think I've been so successful with my ventures. So in that sense, I thank my mental illness, but at the same perspective, it is something, obviously a lot of us struggle with, is our mental health. And I think it's very important to take care of, but also be aware of, right? Because that's how you take care of.
I completely agree. Although I will say, this is, I think, the first time I've ever heard someone describe ADD and ADHD as being under the umbrella term of mental illness. Like that, I don't know. I guess most of the time when people refer to mental illness, they mean like, dealing with depression or psychosis or schizophrenia, something like that. So I guess it does come under that umbrella because it is a lot of different things. But yeah, I just that was kind of interesting.
And you think about the ADD and OCD really lend itself to exactly what you said. Often leads to depressive states,
right,
and a lot of anxiety states too. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Absolutely, I guess it's a byproduct of, but I'm pretty aware of it. I'm like, if it wasn't a struggle, I wouldn't try to overcome it. But yeah.
I agree. Just going back to what you were saying about sort of like using it for good, for positive, because I've interviewed other YouTubers on here that have suffered with things like ADHD, and they do the same thing. And they said for instance, I had a YouTuber on here called Project Zeb who sort of made a similar point about because his is more to do with struggling to kind of regain attention. So he could be like really focused and doing everything, and then his attention just snaps to something else. So I suppose with YouTube, it's kind of useful in the sense that if you're doing like short videos, then it's fine. But if he was doing something more long form, like say like a Twitch stream, that would be more of a challenge. And also, again, just putting a line under that point that you're making. One of my youngest brothers, I believe, has ADHD. I always get confused. There's so many variants. It's whatever. But basically, he has a lot of energy and all over the place. But he's a very clever kid. And what's really interesting, I remember I saw him actually just before lockdown. Because that part of my family's in London and I've moved up north, and I luckily got to see him doing some like ice skating. And it's funny how like you got this kid who just like won't start talking and is going a million miles an hour, and then you put him in this completely different scenario where he's got focus and put all of his energy into one thing, and suddenly he's like a machine. He's like and it works. And I guess that is kind of the whole point, is it's all about how you look at these things and how you approach these things. Because like one of the things I remember my dad saying about that situation was that kind of because I think he's going to a particular school now that is better equipped for that. But like before, he was going to just a standard school where all the teachers were kind of useless and didn't really know sort of like, I guess, how to approach that, how to make the best of that, and really like encourage someone to kind of use that. You know what I mean? Like bringing it back to you, actually, did you have like a sort of a similar experience at school? Were your teachers, did they foster that in you and kind of sort of push you in the right direction, or was it kind of a bit of pushback and you had to fight it? Or like, what was your experience of that growing up?
So overall, I think it was embraced. I think, as the chubby, funny kid growing up, I think that's always on some level embraced. The one thing I will say about my my brain is I often say too much, right? And that's what got me in trouble in school. It wasn't even that I was saying horrible things, but I would just say too much, right? I would stand up in front of the class and maybe talk about my what my mom does for a living and how much she makes and how much she pays in taxes.
Right,
and it's like, you don't need to say all of that. And so I would often, get kicked out of class for things like that, but never anything in a negative sense. And to exactly your point with your brother, I think that's so beautiful, because when I am able to hone in on my passion, and there's a few things that I'm wildly passionate about, when I can hone in on those things, it is a laser hyper focus, and the distractions almost don't happen. The closest analogy I heard is like people who play sports, when they are in the field, all they see is color, like the colors of the jersey. You don't really know the play-by-play. And I think that's very true when you're doing something that you're passionate about. you're driving with it. You don't see any of the distractions because you're going so laser focused fast on the thing you're passionate about. And so I think that's why people with ADD and ADHD thrive and things like that, because they don't get that shot often, because there are a lot of distractions in the day to day. But yeah, like I said, if you focus on something with passion and boom, that's when you know you're doing something right, and you're probably following, your life's work.
That's a really good point, actually, especially in this day and age where, you've got all this access to fast moving kind of technology. And also, to be honest with you, I think there's a wider issue just in society in general with this kind of
is that a fat joke?
No.
A wider issue. Wow, Christian Reeve.
You got me, man. You got me. No, I was going to say there's this wider issue in society in terms of instant gratification culture, and people kind of having a very short attention span. And I think that it's even more challenging for someone who's got ADHD or something like that. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different avenues now to kind of put that into. And I think, content creation is perfect with that, especially with the energy thing. I mean, for my brother, he's often being told, you need to calm it down, you need to slow it down. And it's like, with something like this, it's like, there are no limits, go nuts. So yeah, I hope he does that in the future. But anyway, we're bringing it back to you. I just thought that was interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't know that, so I've learned something new. But in my research, obviously, I learned that you write children's books, and I saw this on your website and several other places. But I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to actually start writing children's books?
So the story is actually really wild how it all happened. I was actually in, this is going to take a turn. I was actually in the hospital with congestive heart failure. And my heart was pumping at 66%. It was a condition called myopericarditis. And I remember sitting in that hospital bed, frankly, terrified, not knowing if I'm gonna make it out. Like, genuinely, my last rites were read to me. I had friends, visiting. It was very, very bizarre time in my life. And I remember saying to God or the universe, whatever's out there. And I said, I don't know. And I'm clearly in a very vulnerable, scared state. If I get out of this hospital, I have to spread my message to far more people than I have in the way that I have. And before that, much of my time was spent touring and on stage. And so I knew I had to shift my medium if I wanted to reach more people. Let's say I had a year left or a couple months left. And frankly, at that time, when things were getting diagnosed, I have no idea what my future held. How do you get that message? Taught me is to remain in the moment and appreciate the now. That's such an important thing, especially when you're dealing with a health scare or your day-to-day life, is be grateful for the now, no matter how crummy it is or how great it is, being grateful for now. And I remember saying, if I get out, I have to spread that message. And I think it's going to be a kid's book about improv. And the funny thing is that had never been done before. No one had written a kid's book about this thing we call improv comedy. Of course, theater and comedy books were out there, but nothing tailored to this thing. And so that was kind of the idea. The first one did really, really well. So I decided, you know what, there's other avenues to go. So of course, there's the Giraffe That Taught Me How to Laugh, which is all about improv and comedy. The Giraffe and Cheetah Taught Me Theta, which is of course about theater. And of course, the Giraffe and Bunny Taught Me How to Be Funny. And that one's all about stand-up and comedy. So I figured, listen, if I knew earlier on that this could be my avenue, and to exactly your point and your brother, if people knew that these avenues were out there for each other at a young age, gosh, we could flourish some cool things. Because me experimenting in football was fun, but it just wasn't my passion,
So when did that actually happen to you? How old were you when that happened?
December 2009, and I was early 20s, and I was actually the youngest patient on the heart floor at the time, which was wild. You'd walk down the hallway. I mean, there's some comedy in it too. One of my friends came to visit me, and there's in the States, there's something called the VA hospital, right? Which houses and helps veterans,
Right. Yeah.
both present and retired, right? And so one of my friends had gotten lost and walked through the VA hospital. And so she saw horrendous things. I mean, left and right. And then she finally gets to me. She goes, "You look fine. Get up. You look fine." I said, "Where's this country?" She goes, "I just walked through the VA hospital and it was, not good." I'm certainly not poking fun at people struggling, but it was some fun moment in that dark time.
Okay, I don't want to like push you too much on this, but I will just ask because I think you're an easygoing guy and you feel it sounds like you're willing to talk about this. Was there ever kind of a moment like where you were like, because when you first said that, it kind of sounded like maybe you were like a child or something, but like early 20s, that's, you're a man, and I can imagine what would be going on. I remember my mindset when I was 21. Like what were you thinking? Like were you thinking, was there a point where you were like, okay, this is it, like shit, this might be it, or was it kind of like every day is different, or like, I don't know, where was your mindset at, generally speaking?
I don't often say this piece when I share the story, but there was a nanosecond that I really thought it was the end in a genuine state. And that was when my doctor walked in and provided the results, and she said, Jon, you are in congestive heart failure and your heart's only pumping at this percent. And all I could think about is the words congestive, which I was like, oh, that sounds kind of like a cold. Okay. Heart, that seems like a very important muscle. Failure, that only goes one way, right? Like oftentimes when things fail, like your engine, they don't come back. And so that's when I was like, oh shit, like this might be Jon's time, which was a really amazing caterpillar butterfly moment as well, because I knew it couldn't be over. And I knew if I believed it was over, it would be over. And so I was insane. I knew I was going to get out. I knew for whatever reason, I was going to beat this stupid virus and get out. And essentially what the virus did was attack the heart wall and the heart muscle itself. It moved past the wall and into the muscle. And it was a wild time, but that's been my whole belief about life. And if I can go on a quick additional piece that I learned, watching my heart rate in the hospital bed made me realize what life is supposed to be. And what I mean by that is all of our days start here. And there's times that things get better and the best, and we hit a peak and we don't think it can get any better than that peak. And guess what? It can't. And then things start going downhill. Like shit. And then we go past the point where we started and we hit even further out. Like, God, this is a really bummed state. But you know what? Then it goes up a little bit. Then it stays stagnant and then it does it again. And that is literally what our heart is telling us to do. That is a heartbeat. It's literally what we should be experiencing. We need the peaks and the valleys to experience life, literally with our heart. So why wouldn't we enjoy those moments of high and low in life? And I'm getting chills all over because that's what I left that hospital bed with. I knew I experienced this and this. And I'm gonna for the rest of my life if I want to live.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. That's incredible. I will say, just tagging onto that, I have a similar kind of, I suppose, outlook with life in terms of, you have to embrace the highs and the lows, but I've never actually drawn the actual literal analogy that you've just made. And to me, it just sounds so obvious and simple, but anyway.
I mean, when you're watching it for weeks, right, on a computer screen, you have to make something with it. You're like, the universe or God is putting this in front of my face every day. For what reason? Hopefully I'm learning something from it, right? And then I realized, right, if you go flatline, that's A, no way to live, and B, you know what that is.
In terms of like the kind of positivity that you have, because something like that, it's life-changing. It changes how you think. And I know, like in my own personal life, I have these shifts. Sometimes it's every couple of years. Sometimes it can be in the space of a couple of months. It really depends. I'm not going to ask, like, were you the same person? But did you have the same kind of level of positivity then that you have now? Or was that something that you kind of, you came out of hospital and like, okay, chapter 2, chapter 3? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
I always had the power. I just didn't know how to harness it, if that makes sense. I always had all of this energy and inside positivity that I just didn't know how to execute or radiate in the proper way. And oftentimes, especially in my younger years, it came off as annoying, right? Or not very pleasant. And as I grew older, especially after that experience, it was like, you have to be very clear with what your intention is and what your intent for the world is with your message. And that was that. So to your point, yes, I was the same person, but it's like when a witch finally knows her powers. You're like, now I know what to do with them. And that's really how I feel. It's like, now I know, I use my powers for good as much as possible. I know that any powerful being in the world has the ability to use their powers for good or for evil. And I really believe that that's why I'm here, to spread the light, spread the positivity, spread the joy. And it really went into overdrive after heart failure, no doubt.
Wow. I did
not think we were going to have this conversation, right? I've got to be honest. I was getting ready to kind of chit chat, more, surface level things about social media, things like that. But thank you, because again, I don't talk about this often, and it's really quite lovely to talk about. It's really cool. Thanks.
No, it's. I mean, like for me, I often inevitably end up going deep on things. Same thing, sometimes I'll just do a vlog. I did some...
Can we go back to that for a second? You go deep on things. Okay, well, hopefully this meeting can continue after the interview.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, Jon and his sense of humor are a reason alone to score as well.
Sometimes this, sometimes this.
I've never seen you like this. It's always been.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, let's bring it back to your children's books again. This might sound like a silly question, but I was kind of intrigued because you do actually write adult books as well. I believe you wrote a book on stand-up. But in terms of the children's books, is it difficult to write books for children? I mean, do you have to kind of, I don't know, speak to kids, or like try and put yourself in a different mindset? Like, what's the process you go through to try and do that? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's kind of the offshoot of what we were just talking about, being so in tune with your intention that you have to be able to convey your intention and message in the most simplest of terms, which is oftentimes a struggle for me, right? Because I tend to go on and on. I may use too many words, big words, little words, whatever. And so to convey a message so pure that not only a child understands it, but really resonates with them. And then rhyming, because all my books are rhyming. I just love a good rhyme. Okay, yeah. That was one thing. I wouldn't say it was a struggle. I just thought it was really an interesting exercise for an adult, because how often are you told speak with as little words as possible and try to convey your message? And it's like, oh, not very often. So if you're just trying to convey what this art form is in the purest form in 20 pages, how can you do that? And that was fun for me. But I do think there's a place for both, right? I don't know that I could speak in rhymes and children terms every day.
You'd be like Dr. Seuss now.
That's right.
Yeah. I would just say on a side note, before I ask you another question on that, that whole concept of trying to do things in as simple terms as possible. Like, I always find that frustrating. Like, for some reason, that just brought up this memory of when I was at university. And this has happened a few times throughout my life. But, you get that scenario where you've just met a bunch of people, right? And, I'm pretty easygoing. I can get on with a group of people and stuff. It's, I care less now. Back in the day, I was, like, kind of nervous. But now I'm just like, whatever. Like, who cares? But I will always hate this scenario of where you walk into the classroom or whatever, and it's like, stand up, tell us a fact about yourself and a lie about yourself, and like talk about yourself, and I don't know, use one word to sum yourself up. And it's like, without sounding egotistical, that is literally impossible to do. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's so lame. It's like,
totally.
I'm kind. Elaborate. Why are you kind? How? Well, I don't know. Anyway.
It's true, you know. It's funny. That's actually one of the things I used to get in trouble for, especially in like the elementary days. You know, they would do those intros. And I'm like, okay, Jon Jon, tell us about yourself. I'm Jon Jon. I have 2 parrots, and they know how to say my entire family's names. The teacher, you know, my mom would pick me up. They said, "That is so wonderful. Jon Jon told us about the 2 parrots you have." My mom's like, "We don't have parrots," but you had to make it interesting. I mean, these class stories were boring to me as a child, right? And that's what I talk about, like with the ADD. Like, I was like, "Oh, we'll talk about the parrots that don't exist."
It's funny as well. You mentioned that. Like, I've often had these scenarios in life where people ask me, like, "Tell me about yourself," and I'm like, my mind just goes blank, and I'm like, "Shit, man, I must just be a really boring person." Like, I do. and then I start, like, when I go away, I look at everything I'm into, and I'm like, oh, I could have said like this and this and this and this. But in those scenarios, I'm like, oh, I mean, all I really do is like YouTube and stuff. That's not really interesting, is it? That's because I expect that you're supposed to just talk about extravagant hobbies, like, you know, I go, I don't know, skiing in the Alps, and, you know, I do this and I don't know, just everything I do sounds kind of whatever. I don't know. I just get like weird in those situations. Anyway.
See, yeah, and I do think it's funny you hit that, because like a lot of people don't realize, a lot of us who content create, actually this is our passion. Like, yes, there is an element of work, no doubt about it. But I like my unboxing channel. I love unboxing shit. It is like something I'm really passionate about. I love surprises, right? And so I think that's, you know, it's okay to be passionate about things like that. But I do have to tell you, I just picked up a human hobby, or as I like to call it, a muggle hobby.
Okay.
I just started because, you know, I don't think I'm a muggle. I'm constantly, you know, creating. But anyway, I got into painting ceramics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm gonna show you because it's a video podcast. You're welcome, world.
Woo.
Look at this bad boy. This is the first reveal of my ceramics coffee mug.
Oh, wow.
Look at her. And I painted
really
the
nice.
inside, and little signature there.
Are you gonna sell these on your store as merch or something like that?
That would be hilarious. No, that would be this. Thank you for the plug. That would be this Jon Jon merch here, available at jonjonlannen.com. Ding. No, but honestly, this has been just a great passion project of mine. I've done a couple of these. I have a couple more appointments in the studio, and it's very weird to have a human hobby, I got to tell you.
You should definitely consider selling them, because I think that's actually a good little, like, I would buy one of those. It looks good. It's a nice color, kind of, you know, it's simple but like nice, you know. It kind of reminds me of something that I've seen before, possibly that kind of like Australian pattern thing you get sometimes. I don't know what I'm saying, but the pattern kind of looks like.
It reminds me of something also. Let's get it together, Christian.
For those
only listening to
for those who aren't listening, I would recommend you just watch on YouTube. But moving swiftly on, I don't feel like I can return to the kids' books at this point.
Yeah. We have to segue out of that.
I'll ask one final question, actually. What would you say are like the main differences between writing books for kids and writing books for adults? Like, what's the main differences between the two?
I think the biggest thing, like we were just saying, is knowing that your words have to be simple enough and powerful enough to still have the same message. But the same is also true when you're writing adult books, right? You can be more wordy, but the similarities, you still have to be true with your intention. What do you want people to gain after reading your book, listening to your podcast, watching a video? What is it that people want to gain? And I think that's the most important message when you're writing anything as far as a book medium, articles, any sort of journalism like that, or creating content online. Is knowing what you want do you want to make people feel? And hopefully it's goodness, you know?
Thanks for sharing that. So according to various sources online, I think I found this either on your Amazon or your website. I can't remember which one it was, but basically it says that you're currently working on your 6th book. You have 6 books out. Tell us about this process and what the book will actually be about.
Perfect. So yeah, the book I'm really, really excited about. It's going to highlight some of my the one thing I can share is it's going to highlight a lot of my passions. There's elements of professional wrestling in it.
Oh, wow.
There's an element of spirituality in it, and of course, a lot of self in it. This is going to be my first full fiction novel. So I'm really, really excited about it. I don't know where it will go, and I'm currently in the planning stages from as far as character development along with the general storyline. And then once kind of that's broken down, I kind of have a backwards way of working for the book. I always think about the biggest piece to, the peak. What is the thing in the book? And kind of trailing off on this side and this side for the peak. But it's a lot of fun. And recently, I took a break from YouTubing and podcasting, and it's really been able to reset me to get back into that. Because, as you know, if you're creating constantly, it's really tough to add new to it, especially when other things are going well, such as the podcast, YouTubing, things like that.
Absolutely. Just on that point as well about approaching stories, it kind of reminds me of what Eric Bischoff always says about writing stories. For those who don't know, Eric Bischoff very famously was, I believe, the chief executive officer of WCW. So that's World Championship Wrestling. Head honcho at WCW, yes. And basically he worked there for many years, and then he obviously worked for the WWF, WWE as a character and also behind the scenes guy. Anyway, he's also worked in TV and a bunch of other mediums, and he always talks about when you're approaching a story, he goes on and on and on about this, but like that you should have, your beginning, middle, and end, which sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but he always says like you should kind of like have your ending in mind first and kind of work your way backwards. And it kind of sounds like you're sort of saying the same thing in sense of like you have to have that main point that you want to hammer home, and then everything else kind of like unravels slowly. But yeah, just interesting.
That's right. Yeah. It's so true. It's like you have to think about what it is that's intriguing, right? You're exactly right. It's kind of that ending to beginning, because you have to, because that also assists in build up. I mean, you can use that analogy for anything, right? If they create a movie, right? There's certain media that happens 2 weeks prior, right? A month prior, they might be doing press junkets and things like that. Months before that, it'd be social media posting. So you're building up to exactly your point, the grand poobah, the grand finale here at the end. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So just moving on, you're the owner of Jon Jon & Co., which your website describes as being a firm specializing in coaching, comedy, and consulting. I was going to sort of define it myself, but I figured I'd just take your words because that kind of puts it across better. So talk to us about the services that you offer and sort of how you got into this.
Perfect. So I opened Jon Jon & Co. 10 years ago when I wanted to create more improv programs in high schools and middle schools. And so what happens oftentimes is there was a time in the recession when I began that a lot of our theater funding was getting cut in the States. So there wasn't an outlet for theater classes anymore. So what I did is I, for a really small fee, would go into schools and say, hey, listen, I'll put either a theater program in here or an improv program here, and we'll just do after school stuff. And the kids can do it, and we'll just jump in. Here's this nominal fee for the school to pay, which was substantially less than having a program, teacher, etc. And then it grew, right? We started with one school, grew to 2 schools, then we had 5 schools, and then we peaked over 20 schools. So I had to hire a whole staff of teachers to go teach these classes. And so that was really, really wild. So that really is what it entails for as far as our comedy division. The other thing is obviously we do live shows and things like that. Mm-hmm. The coaching side of my business is mainly life coaching. So I'm a certified professional life coach and a CPC as well. And so I do offer life coaching services for those who are interested. It's not my primary source of income or business, but I am passionate about it. And I, of course, have a few private clients that I work with today. And then, of course, the consulting is some of my favorite work. And that's consulting, assisting people with book publishing, production, and, of course, comedy consulting. So I love coming in and watching a comedy show, for example, and just giving some feedback and some coaching on kind of the sciences of comedy. I've been in the comedy industry for 15 plus years, and there's certain things that I've learned throughout the years. And I've talked about this a little bit. There's certain sciences to comedy, literal things like inflection, letters, how you end a sentence. Those things innately make people laugh. So I oftentimes go in and try to add those small factors into people's shows. And that's one of my favorite things to do through Jon Jon & Co.
Talk to us a little bit about this life coaching thing, because I'll be honest, I've heard people joke about this. For some reason, I don't know if you're familiar with the English TV show Peep Show by any chance. I don't know if you've seen that.
I am, yes.
There's a funny part in that episode in that where Jeremy, for those who don't know, it's two guys living in a flat together, and they're basically both imbeciles for different reasons. But Jeremy is kind of the younger, more, I guess you could say, cooler one, sort of. Anyway, he decides that he will become a life coach, which is absolutely ridiculous because his life is just a mess. So it's like, why the hell is he giving coaching on life skills? But like, I don't know. I kind of thought, like, at the time I was like, okay, that seems a bit silly, but I guess that must actually be a proper profession. So talk to me a little bit about like what is involved in that, how you help people and such.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece to being a help in any day-to-day life is the ability to listen. And I think that's often what we need in this world. So I think that's one of the primary functions when I work through people with this coaching, is listening. And the other thing that is really interesting is a really common misconception. And don't get me wrong, I've done a lot of life coach characters on stage, kind of poking fun at the motivational speaker and this, that, and the other. But one thing to keep in mind, a lot of life coaching is actually helping the individual navigate themselves. The number one rule when you get your certification is you're actually not providing any advice to anyone, right? It's not like a therapist or a psychiatrist. There is no direct advice that you're providing people as a life coach. You are asking the questions. And I'll give you an example, right? What is something that you're struggling with today? And you might provide me an answer, right? And then I may ask you something very simple, like, what could you do more of? And you're literally telling me your plan of action. All right, in that situation, what could you do less of? And you're literally answering. So it's my role to help you navigate the answers you already have, because I have no idea how to navigate your life, right? I can help and add additional tidbits, but the key is answering questions with your client so that they can pave the way, right? Because we all know rationally what we could do less of in a situation or more of. And then of course, those questions become a little bit more advanced into our details. And then we set goals and things like that. I just think it's accountability, right? Not everyone has a friend who can hold them accountable. And especially in this time, some people don't even have a phone call to call someone to hold them accountable. And I think that's one thing that's really been helpful in this time has been this coaching. So yeah, that's kind of coaching in a nutshell. But it's funny you say that, because I hear that very often. Like I do very little speaking really in most of my sessions. I really help people navigate, where are you going with it, and what do you want to accomplish with your goals, because they're your goals. I don't want to tell you if you're interested in going down the YouTube path. I by no means want to deter you and tell you to join the army, right? I mean, why would I do that? But let's figure out this path better for you, right? So. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, man. Well, just on a final note on that, like, what's like your kind of best case scenario and worst case scenario, or best experience, worst experience with life coaching? We'll try and have a balance. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, here's something I succeeded at. Here's something not so good.
Yeah, definitely.
Almost challenging.
I think the most challenging, or the thing that was tough to overcome, is, and we did over some time, was we were working with a client who just was in their own way. And what I mean by that, and those questions I asked you earlier, what can you do more of or what you can do less of? In any situation, no matter how right or wrong you are, you can be reflective and figure that out. When you're unable to just jump that hurdle, it's going to be really tough to dive into anything else. And so that's what I'd say is just being open with yourself. If you're not open with yourself, there's no one who can help you, not even the most professional of professionals. Do
you mean like, when you say that, like, if you're not able to sort of sit there and be real to yourself, like, so like if let's say you ask me that and I say, there is nothing I can do to change, then it's like me not being realistic. Is that kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah, in a sense, for sure. And my job is to help get you to a point. In that example, it's like, okay, now at the surface level, it seems like there's nothing else could be done, right? You were late because of traffic. At the surface level, that seems like there's nothing else that could be done in the situation. And yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But people who aren't able to kind of take that next step, those are tough. But those who are, right, it's all right, well, I could have maybe thought about traffic and left even earlier than I ever have. Now that's just that's working in a place of solution. I think that's really, really helpful. And the flip side is, of course, seeing people navigate and soaring with their life and their passion. There is nothing more cool. You know, I had a client who published a book, and that was so cool for me to see. It was a dream of hers since she was 16, right? And so we worked together on having goals, holding ourselves accountable, and getting it published, whether you go through an independent publishing agency, whether you do what's called rogue, as I call it, or if you go through a traditional agency. You have 3 outlets, but here's the deal. You can do it. Now let's go down those paths. And that's one thing that I think has helped my life coaching services specifically, is my knowledge of some of these avenues that most of my clients are into: podcasting, YouTube, and of course, publishing. So I think that definitely helps. But yeah, I would say that's probably the most gratifying, is knowing you were a small stepping stone in someone achieving their life's goal. That is so cool. You know, if we could all work like that, the world would be a much better place, I'd say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I try to do that as much as I can as well. Yeah, awesome. Just bringing it back to Jon Jon & Co for a second. Now, I'm like you, I'm very active on social media. You'll often see me posting loads and loads. And yes, it is all me. One thing I do to get around that, though, is to schedule everything ahead of time so that, you know, I could be out playing basketball or something and my latest video drops and blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? It's like sensible. It helps. It saves time, blah, blah, blah. But the principal point being that I'm doing everything. So I'm still spending that time doing it. And I've kind of been confused about this, right? Because you've got your own personal brand, and then you've got, so just Jon Jon Lannen, and then you've got Jon Jon & Co, which I now understand is like fully independent. Okay, I'll explain. So if you take like Twitter as an example, you've got your Jon Jon & Co, and then you've got a thing called Boom Boom Promotions. Is that right? I got that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I understand Boom Boom Promotions is kind of just like networking and, as it sounds, promotions, trying to increase awareness, connect, promote other people, so on and so forth, right? And then Jon Jon & Co is slightly different in the sense that that's actually a company where you're offering services and it's its own entity, but you do promote with that as well. And the interesting thing, it took me a little bit of a while to fully get my head around this, but with your 2 YouTube channels, one is with the Jon Jon & Co one, it's kind of like it sounds, you know, you plus other people doing things like podcasts and such together. And then your own personal channel is for things like the unboxing that you mentioned and I guess vlogs and other things that you're doing in your life. So basically the point being that you're very, and I've said this to you before, that, you know, you're very professional with how you approach these things, clearly very business minded and orientated with that. But do you actually have like a team working for you in terms of like for the social media stuff, or is that all you? Talk to us about that.
Yep. So I have different teams. So a lot of what I do is consulting with other businesses. So I have
cool.
There are a lot of posts that I take control over, but there are organizations that handle some of the marketing for me. Some of the imagery, especially the scheduling of posts, that I definitely have help with. Now that's Jon Jon & Co. I do run that ship primarily myself. Now, Boom Boom Promos is actually me and 4 other creators who are promoting and helping. And I just started that, as to your point, just a networking piece to help out. I knew I had a following of some sort, so I figured, hey, let me jump in and see if I can help promote my friends, people I love, other streamers, and things like that. But in a nutshell, here's probably the easiest way for me to describe it. Jon Jon & Co is all of my business stuff, anything associated with my business. And Jon Jon Lannen is any of my personal stuff. But to your point, my vlogs and unboxing, I just, you know, when I started that channel a little over now a year and a half ago, I just didn't feel like it was suited for Jon Jon & Co. You know, there was people who may have paid me to take improv classes, that this just made no sense to post on Jon Jon & Co. They're like, wait, what? But anything that kind of falls under that umbrella, like the podcast and anything like that, is typically under Jon Jon & Co. And I really like to try to keep Jon Jon Lannen all my personal fun stuff, especially on my YouTube. You know, it's That's my passion project. I don't, if that picks up, great, but I truly do that YouTube channel for my own soul.
I have the exact same problem with my branding, right? Because if you go on like my LinkedIn, right, it's like I'm a different person. It's all because like my specialism, I suppose, like my what I studied at university was marketing, right? So it's all business, marketing, all that stuff, all the day jobs I've ever had. And there's basically no mention at all of anything that I do online. And I thought about it. I thought about like just putting like content creator or stuff, because I do a lot of stuff there and I could write it in a way that's compelling. I mean, I do lots of social media marketing and all of this stuff. And I'm sure many of us could do the same thing, but it's like you said, it doesn't feel like appropriate. And the only way I've been able to come up with a way to have everything on the same platform is to have my own website. And then, it's by category and stuff. But even there, it's different. It's like the greater amount of time is in terms of information is spent on explaining like the services that I offer. But then when it comes to like YouTube, the podcast, it's very little information. It's to the point. It's different. I don't know. The vibe is different. But basically the reason that I bring that up is that I get what you mean. You have to kind of establish these things differently and to give the right kind of perception as well. And it works in that sense. So I think that's a very smart move on your point. Just briefly before we move on, like who or what inspired you in terms of that kind of business mindedness? Because a lot of the way that you approach things is exactly the way that I've learned, both through my studies and just through experience and stuff. But like, I don't often see that, because a lot of the people that I talk to that I know, they'll have a very basic level of how to promote themselves, but not necessarily that understanding of how to present themselves professionally. Even the way that they talk, if you drop into a Jon Jon Lannen podcast or a Twitch stream, every single time, doesn't matter if there's like one person in there or 50 people in there, like you have this very professional tone the whole time. So talk to me a little bit about, where that comes from.
Yeah, I think that comes from a myriad of different places and inspirations. The one that always sticks so true to me is I was studying comedy studies in Chicago at college, or as you guys say overseas, at university. I love that, by the way. And I had a dance teacher. Yes, I was in dance class because it's part of the prerequisite. However, I was in this dance class, and a professor named Dennis Wise, he actually told us on the first day of class, he goes, I want you all to go out there and get business cards. And then he goes, now what would you put on your business card? And we asked a student, and she said, her name, and I would say student underneath. He goes, that right there is what I need to change here. And I said, and we're all like, what is he talking about? We're all students here. He goes, you all need to leave here today. Vistaprint does 500 free business cards with shipping. And I want you all to do a business card.
Pause.
Yep.
Right. I'm sorry, but that company, right? I'm sick of this. When companies do this.
Yes.
500 free business cards.
Yes.
Shipping. $15.
Yep.
Well, it's not fucking free, is it?
That's right. It's not at all. And the other thing I will tell you about Vistaprint, the free ones, right, actually put their Vistaprint.com on the back. So pay for it, people. Okay. But my point was, we were poor college students. And our teacher said, I want you all to go to Vistaprint or whatever business card store you like to go to. He said, I want you to put your names on there, and I want you to put what you're going to be underneath it.
Oh, that's cool.
So Jon Jon Lannen, you're going to be actor. Michelle, you're going to be dancer. Robert, you're going to be singer. And that was the first time it made sense to me. I'm going to be a student forever. Yeah. But I have to define what my craft is now. And so, of course, I put comedian. And it's interesting that has really shaped my entire life and even business, right? Comedy is the forefront of every other tenet of the company. Comedy is at the forefront of all my passion projects. Comedy is at the forefront when I'm talking to people, just in general. And so that was really impactful in my life. And I remember saying, and a lot of people didn't get the message, right, on that level. I'm like, he's saying you need to be who you be. And RuPaul says it perfectly. Be yourself and deliver at all times. That's what people want. Just be yourself and try to deliver that at all costs.
Yeah, I
So that's
couldn't
what I've
agree
tried to
more.
do.
It's kind of like that saying of, like wear the clothes for the, I'm butchering the saying, but like, wear the clothes for the job you want. It's a similar mindset, But I think it does
That's
kind of
right.
hold true that your attitude needs to be that. I mean, certainly ever since I started taking YouTube properly and seriously last year, my approach and I guess the vibe and everything has been different. Like with this podcast, it's definitely the most professional thing I've ever created. And I guess I do take sort of inspiration from certain people because I thought about like different ways I could do it. I could just like do it with no research and just talk, and that is possible. But I feel like I prefer to do like proper interviews, at least initially the first time, just to kind of showcase someone and get an idea. But the point being that that kind of approach is not something that I envisioned. Like I thought to myself, like I could have done this earlier, you know what I mean? Like a year ago or 2 years ago. And it's like, no, it wouldn't have worked because I wouldn't have had that kind of, I guess like that realization point that like you've spoken about throughout this conversation so far. Like I feel like you have to go through certain hurdles in life and realize certain things. And also, yeah, I wrote one of these bullshit quotes on my Facebook or Twitter or wherever it was earlier. Basically saying that, sometimes in life you got to like, well, no, just outright, you should realize, once you realize, your potential, then that's where the success begins. But I think a lot of people kind of give up too easily. And as you said, they're not kind of consistent with it. They don't always show up. Like, here's something like really simple, right? Every time I do this, I go make the effort and like do my hair and look presentable, right? Which sounds like something really obvious. But do you know what? When I was doing the TCJ podcast, I was looking back like today, just randomly, and I was looking at like how many videos of myself where I look like shit. And I was like, there's no wonder that no one wanted to like watch this, because it's just, why would you want to watch some guy who looks like homeless and half, I'm not trying to be mean, but you get my point, like just not presentable. And it kind of, if you're trying to present a certain image and a certain thing to people and you're trying to be taken seriously, you've got to present yourself in that way. And it's not just like the actual look of something, but also the format and the tone and like what people can expect. And it goes back to everything that you were saying before about, dividing it up and having certain things that people expect on certain channels and so on and so forth. But yeah, actually, just before we move on, you mentioned about unboxing, and this was kind of like a thing that I wasn't going to fix out on for too long, but I am kind of intrigued about this because it's not something I've ever particularly been interested in. Like, I get the appeal in the sense that if it's like a collector's item or something interesting that not many people are going to get access to, then it's pretty cool. But talk to us about the appeal of this, because you do this consistently. So obviously there is something that you enjoy about it, otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it. So what's the appeal of unboxing videos?
I think if you like Christmas or birthdays, unboxing is for you. Now, I actually started it because I also have a rule. I do not record any unboxing at all until I am so stoked like it's Christmas. I will, if it's just sitting there and I know I need to do it, I will not record it. Because to exactly your point, what we were saying earlier, that intention reads. If it feels like work, people are going to read that, right? If I have any ounce of thought that this feels like, oh God, I got to do this, someone's going to have an ounce of thought and feel that and maybe have an opinion about it. Now, that's my big appeal with the actual doing of it. I want to get excited. It's really, really fun and positive. But I love surprises that I can control. So I don't love surprises that are, surprise parties might not be my thing and things like that, right? But surprises in a box, literally, is so appealing to me. So I have no idea what I'm going to get week in and week out. And to exactly your point, some of the stuff, is sitting on my bookshelf here next to me, and some of it is in my storage unit that we're going to be doing some really cool projects with at the end of this year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's really cool. So it's all going to be utilized again, but the joy it brings me, and frankly, all the different people in different walks of life, that's been the coolest thing. And the one thing that's been really gratifying and really rewarding has been my WWE unboxings, right? My WWE and AEW and wrestling videos have done really well on my channel. It's some of the best content as far as viewership is. And it's enabled me to meet some really, really cool people around the world, just to know that they're also passionate about wrestling, you know? And so that's one thing that's been really, really cool as well. And then, you know, like I do wrestling boxes, Avengers, I do, you know, Golden Girls, Bob Ross, I mean, a myriad of different things. And so people come in and tune in, you know, different people come in to tune in. And it's really, you know, it always blows me away that people watch these videos and sit there and enjoy these videos. It like, words can't express what joy that gives my heart, you know, just that people are laughing with me on a Saturday morning. Like, oh, that's all I want. Just one person to enjoy one piece of content I've put out. And these unboxings have done that. And the unboxings have done that more for me than any other of my projects I've done. And I think it's because what we talked about earlier, it's the one thing I didn't do for business. And I could have done it with the, you know, the Jon Jon Lannen page, which already had 1,000 subscribers, but I started from scratch. I started with, you know, the 50 something subscribers I've had from 2010, 2011. And I said, you know, I'm gonna do this. And ironically, that's the one that's doing the best. And I think it's back to what we were saying earlier. If you're passionate about it and your intent is pure, how can it not succeed, you know?
I think your point actually about having that right energy and that mindset is so important. You know, it's funny actually. I'm going to go on a bit of a serious point actually, because I always do this anyway with everything that I do. You know, I just won't record if I feel that way. But occasionally I will have like a bad mental health day, and I actually started today as a bad mental health day. And my first thought was, oh shit, I have a podcast with Jon Jon. And I was like, I can't like do the podcast with a bad attitude, because A, it wouldn't work. B, it was just rude. And C, it's like, well, it is. It just wouldn't be acceptable. It wouldn't be professional. So the thought did kind of cross my mind of like, rescheduling all of this. And like, I know you would understand and stuff, but like at the same time, I really wanted to do it. And the thing about obviously mental health is that like, you don't always have a control over it. Like for me, I'm positive, like pretty much 90% of the time, where I get like this one day where it's like, and today was one of those days. And unfortunately, about an hour before, I felt like, okay, and I'm like, right, I'm going to do this. But like, I would say that's the only time that I ever feel like I don't can't do it. But that's actually more of like a physical thing as well, like physically and mentally. But yeah, there are some days when it's just like you said, you just don't feel kind of interested. And I think a lot of the people that do YouTube that are trying to pursue it get caught up in that, making content, just, you know, trying to get the views, trying to get the attention. You know, it's one of the reasons that I don't produce certain things on my channel anymore. Like you won't see me doing reaction videos anymore, because it's a lot of effort for something that I'm not really that interested in. The only one that I did actually enjoy was looking at like old band videos that I did, because that was something I did and it was actually funny. But everything else was just like, you know. Oh, actually, the one where I did reacted to a wrestling thing was kind of cool. But at the same time, I'd already seen that video before, so it's not like it was fake, but it wasn't like my first genuine reaction. I was like, I don't ever want to do fake stuff either. I want it to be 100% real. But yeah, basically, just I really dig that point. I couldn't agree more with that point. But yeah. Let's move it on. Let's talk about podcasts, because that's a big part of what you do. I already knew that you did podcasts, but when I did my research, I found out you did way more than I thought you did. And I was like, how does this guy have time? Like, this is... So let's start with, you have a podcast called That Podcast. So talk to me about sort of what you guys discuss generally, and, you know, like how you kind of got into that in terms of deciding to do that particular podcast.
For sure. So That Podcast is with me and my co-host, El Pity. El Pity is a really good friend of mine. We've been besties now 10 plus years. We actually were receptionists together at a job eons ago. And so we got a kindred spirit. And I don't really, you know, make a ton of friends at work, but she was one of the people I made friends with, and we began hanging outside of work. She started helping me with some Jon Jon & Co. Production. She was my executive producer, and Lori has been one of the most instrumental people with the Jon Jon & Co. staff for eons. I mean, like I said, 8+ years now she's been working with us, and she's really helped executive produce all of the initial Jon Jon happy hours, live shows, and some other improv ensembles we had. Anyway, so we decided one day, listen, we should create something. And she has a background in radio. She actually comes from a radio background. So cool. I think, why don't we do a podcast? And radio has always been sort of a goal, but I never felt like I had a radio voice. And what's really interesting is...
So I just disagree with that entirely, by the way. You do have a
which
radio
is really
voice.
crazy. But this is exactly my point as artists, right? We don't even credit ourselves as that, exactly your point, because I've heard that feedback quite a bit. But when I think about a radio voice, I'm like, I don't have a radio voice. Not that
but to be fair, but that's that. I know what you mean, but that's the thing. We're used to that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's good. That's just what we
right.
Like. I actually think there are so many radio hosts that don't do that are great, and it'd be great if someone like yourself went and did that, because then we wouldn't have to hear all the people going, "Hello, it's W45 on the West Network," and it's like, who cares?
74 degrees and traffic is light. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. But so then we just started up the podcast, and then before you knew it, we had listenership, and then before you knew it, people were sending us PR. Then before you knew it, we were traveling across the country to go interview queens from RuPaul's Drag Race, queens in New York. I mean, it was really crazy. And we started that now about 2.5 years ago. And we're going to be revamping with some new shows, but really we always say it's 3 topics, 2 hosts, and 1 good time. So we never know what we're going to talk about, but the one thing that we do, which is unique in a lot of my productions, is we do 1 take, that's it, that gets published. No matter what, no matter who, no matter how, we're recording for anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And when it's done, we publish, there was times that we're talking about a certain subject and we're going online and, maybe an audio thing happened or we weren't recording, and we don't go back to that. We're not going to just do it again, because it's exactly what you were saying. Like, although it's not fake, you're still talking about it, just doesn't feel authentic to the point it was.
Let's go back and simulate conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And then, for me, it's like, little jokes or quips. Like, if I don't come up with those in the moment, like it feels so staged, It's like, and then I'm going to tell that joke again. It's like, my brain won't remember that joke.
Moving it on with podcasts, you're also a host on San Diego's What It Do podcast. How does this podcast differ from that podcast, and what do you discuss on that?
Perfect. So I was one of the comedic reliefs, and I had kind of like a game segment on What It Do. Unfortunately, What It Do, that bio is probably not up to date. Come on, Amazon. I'm just kidding. What It Do podcast is actually now a defunct podcast. I had a really good time working with them for about a year, and I was one of 4 co-hosts on the show. They recorded out of San Diego. I, of course, am in Denver, Colorado, so I called in remotely.
Right.
And that was a really, really good time for the time that I was a part of the podcast. And, of course, I'm grateful for that, because that was one of the first long-term positions I had in a podcast that wasn't myself, or that I had produced or had, for the lack of better words, a lot of creative control over, right? When we're one of 2 people, that's a lot of creative control, but it was really cool to work under a producer, knowing what my guidelines were, knowing what I had to deliver, and then doing that.
I've always wanted this. One of the frustrating things about doing my own podcast was that, I didn't want the TCJ podcast to end, even though it was a lot of work and we were all doing it ourselves. What I really wanted was, I wanted my own podcast, and eventually I want a team that works for me so I can do it a la Joe Rogan or something like that, right? But I also always really like the idea of being a guest on someone else's podcast and not having to do anything except just show up. Because one thing I can do, and again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I'm just saying that I can talk forever, which not everyone can do. I think I've learned over the years now that sometimes you have to push someone to get something out of them. Other times, you just show up and do it, and you don't need any prep or anything. And whereas I do a lot of prep for my own podcast, because that's the nature of it and it's a one-man show, showing up on someone else's podcast is easy. You just sit there and do what you do, right? So I completely get where you're coming from on that. Like, it's nice, especially, I mean, obviously what you're talking about is more of a professional approach, like actually being produced and having like clear guidelines of what's going on and stuff, and being just informed. It's nice to be informed, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a cool, different, like I said earlier, like I'm a student forever. So it's cool to learn those other traits of producing for a different vision, maybe, or things like that. So yeah, that's been a really good time. And all those podcasts have truly helped, my own podcast, we started, of course, I'm sure we'll get into it, but the Jon Jon Happy Hour. And then of course, now the Daily Cup of Jon Jon. All those projects have really helped guide me to where I am today. And I, like you, love guesting on podcasts. I think it's one of the fun things, because there is, on one end, a total lack of control, but the other side of that is just so wonderful that there's a total lack of control, right? Just to be able to respond and react in the moment is really fun and gratifying too. So
it's funny as well, different people's approaches, because I remember when I came on your podcast, like I legit sat down maybe the week before, and I actually watched the whole pay-per-view, and I've seen it before, but I watched the whole thing. I sat down writing my notes, and then when it came to the day, I mean, it did work out fine, but it kind of went differently to how I thought it would go. I thought we were going to go sort of very in depth, like to the match itself, but we kind of spoke more, I guess, kind of like how Conrad Thompson does his podcasts, when he's kind of picking like a pay-per-view and he kind of talks about the time and the stuff that's going on at that particular time, and sort of paints a picture for people of like what's going on in the industry at that point. And it was similar on your episode as well. And I was kind of like sitting there thinking, like, I wonder if any of these guys just did like nothing. They just showed up and like they're just able to do it. Because I would personally, like, I think I could do that, but I would feel a bit like I wouldn't want to get caught off guard, right? And at the same time, I also kind of felt
totally.
like there's also like this feeling of like guilt if you don't do the prep. Like, I've had podcasts, it's only happened a couple of times. There was one interview that I did where I knew the guy well enough that we pulled it off anyway, and I just was worrying over nothing, but I didn't do any prep, and that was weird, but it was okay. And then I've had more recent episodes where people have returned to the show and we did no prep on purpose because we'd already introduced the person. So it was just kind of like, let's just see what happens. And that is dangerous, I think, because it depends on the person you're talking to. Because some people, you can chat, have fun, it works. Other people, you really got to push for the conversation, and maybe they don't always want to give it to you. I don't know. It's dangerous. But
yeah, no, I hear that. I absolutely hear that. Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing of doing, to your point, different podcasts with different guests. And it exercises a different muscle in your brain, right? There's, because again, there's times that I improvise an entire show with that podcast, whereas I might be really produced on another show. But I'm with you. There is that internal guilt that I have, irrational or not, if I don't do prep. I watched that pay-per-view probably 3 or 4 times the week of, which I know was an erratic, crazy decision. But it's the same thing. It's like if you're moderating a show about the entire pay-per-view, you should probably know what the fuck you're talking about. But I got to tell you, thanks again for joining me. That was a great, great episode. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. I'd love to do it again, to be honest. It was a lot of fun. Because it was my first opportunity to talk about wrestling. And I've actually, in the past, when I was at uni years ago, I thought about just doing a wrestling podcast. And I'm not completely still against that idea, but I think I would, if I was going to do that, I'd want to be on someone else's show. I wouldn't want to run it myself, because it's a lot of work, and you really have to, especially if you're doing like week to week. I think it's easier to do stuff that's bygone. Sure. I think that's why Conrad Thompson's podcast works so well, like all the ones he does, because they go back, they do their research, and they talk about something that's already happened. Whereas if you're talking about something that's happened, like, I don't know how these people do these regular podcasts now where they review everything, because I tell you what, I only watch at the moment like AEW and the major WWE pay-per-views. But if I would watch like all the weekly programming, just WWE and AEW, that already takes up like a massive chunk of time. And like there's so many promotions as well. It would just be a lot to get into to do like a regular podcast. But there's so many things you can talk about.
No doubt.
But we'll get back to wrestling because I want to.
Oh, I totally agree.
There's a few things I want to ask you about unrelated, and then we'll come back to wrestling because that could go on for a while. Just to kind of close it on podcasts.
Yes, it could. Well, yeah.
So obviously we know that you produce regular podcasts that appear on Twitch, and as I understand, it always kind of appears on Twitch first, and then it is posted sort of later on YouTube pretty much straight afterwards, and on podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts and such. So obviously you've already kind of laid out how the podcasts are. Actually, I didn't think you didn't get much of a chance to properly talk to us about that. Talk to us a little bit about the setup for a cup of Jon Jon and Jon Jon's happy hour. Just like what you typically do. Like I know what you do, but like just pretend like none of us know. And it's people. For those who don't know you, what do you do on that? And also, just kind of like how you got into the mindset of like producing those, because one of them is, as it sounds, a morning kind of show, and then the other one is just like a standard kind of podcast. So there's a time differential there. So talk to us about why that's the case, and also the bigger question that I have for you is, what are your kind of future goals and aspirations for these podcasts? Like, what's the ultimate thing that you're kind of building towards with this?
Nice. Yeah, no, so I think the two primary podcasts that I'm on today, and they're probably the most regular that I'm participating in, is, to your point, the Jon Jon Happy Hour. Now, the Jon Jon Happy Hour is the podcast that, to your point, publishes on Twitch, and it's usually a live video show, then later publishes to the platforms. The Jon Jon Happy Hour actually started through Jon Jon & Co. Lori was one of the first producers on the show, as a live variety show in Denver, Colorado. So we actually used to put on live shows to sold-out audiences. So that's how it all started. And then I realized, you know what? A couple different things. A, I have the brand. B, I have all of the logo and marketing. There's no reason to come up with a brand new grand concept for a podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll just continue the Jon Jon Happy Hour. And so I got some really funny criticism. So I was posting a lot more regularly. And as you know, as you post regularly, your content length tends to go down. It is tough to put out an hour podcast every single day. Right?
Oh, yeah.
At least for myself, right? I probably can't execute. And the reason I say an hour specifically is because the show is called the Jon Jon Happy Hour. And so that's what the show was when it was a live show, was 60 minutes on the dot, over. And so I had a couple shows that I produced that were in the 40-minute mark, 50-minute mark. And my brother actually said, okay, if you're going to call it the Jon Jon Happy Hour, you got to have it an hour, or you should call it the Jon Jon Happy Half Hour. And I said, as much as I think that was, as much as I could take that criticism and say, oh, come on, people understand, it's around the happy hour time frame, I realized, that's good advice. So I decided the Jon Jon Happy Hour is going to continue to be produced, but it's a full-length, hour-long show, which includes variety, segments, and games. And so that will happen a little bit less regular throughout the year, similar to the old Jon Jon Happy Hour. Then I realized I still wanted a daily outlet for a couple different reasons. To A, inspire people. But what I say, when I inspire people, oftentimes I'm saying the words so that I can be reminded of them myself, right? When I'm giving good advice, universally, I actually need to hear that message again here so that I can execute it. So that's really what the Cup of Jon Jon is. It's 8 a.m., any day that I'm feeling up for it. And so I get ready in the morning, anywhere between 5 and 6 a.m., talk about my morning, have my cup of Jon Jon or my coffee. And I usually have some sort of inspirational quote that might have spawned the morning. And those have been publishing. And it's wild because we're approaching episode number 50, which was kind of my internal goal at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And so we're just keep that going. And to answer your final question, I think the end goal especially when I was younger, the end goal was so much more important to me. And it's really funny. I was experiencing a little bit of this just trying to get to episode number 50. What I mean by that is I stopped focusing on how good the content and how much I loved doing this was just to get to a number.
Yeah.
And I realized, you love doing this. Why do you wake up and do a podcast? Because it's like something you actually enjoy. So don't forget to enjoy that moment. And so I think that's the end goal. I want to enjoy my life, and I want to enjoy the things that I'm doing. And I think ultimately do that on a financial level. That I think is the end all be all, right? To be able to truly do what you want when you want because you worked your ass to get there. That I think is my end goal. And lastly, I've never heard anyone in Hollywood who's made it big say this person has worked their ass off in the industry for 50 years and didn't make it. Everyone makes it eventually.
It's
right?
true.
Everyone. So if you keep working your ass off, it might be 50 years for me, might be 10 years for you, might be 1 year for me, might be 6 months for you, right? But don't work your ass off and it'll be noticed. I really believe that in my heart and soul, you know, and I think there's going to be some cool things on the horizon for me and these projects, you know, but that's it, is just enjoying it and staying in the moment to continue to enjoy.
Absolutely. So just like you, I'm also involved in a sort of a variety of different projects. Largely that's kind of just because I like to create what I like to create. It's just kind of happened like that, have a lot of interests, and it's the same for you. When did you realize that you wanted to pursue all these different paths rather than just like one thing?
It all happened very organically. Excuse me. As I was growing up, I also had a lot of different jobs, right? Like I'd work at ice cream shop, I worked at the amusement. I had a knack for trying different things. And again, tying it back nicely to what we talked about at the beginning is I think that's my mental health, right? That's really all these projects. And I kind of got into the publishing world. And then I realized, you know, I should probably be online with this stuff. So I started podcasting. Then the other stuff started picking up a little bit stronger, and I had to make sure that gets cultivated. And how I view all of my projects is our life is kind of like a soil, like a little garden. Mm-hmm. And all these projects I do are little seeds that I plant all over the place. Here's YouTube, here's podcasting, here's my books, here's live comedy, here's some other stuff I do. Because I might not nourish them enough, give them enough water. But the other things, as you've talked about, the books, there's a beautiful bush over here. The podcast has managed to grow into a tomato plant, and YouTube is starting to really formulate. And it's really about how we cultivate those things. And so that's really been it. I kind of just do what I really want to do. Mm-hmm. And bringing it back to Jon Jon and Co., that's one of the primary reasons we started, because there wasn't avenues for me to do this show at that theater with that owner. So I'm like, screw it. Start your company and do it yourself. There's not a podcast that starts at 8 a.m. and gives people daily advice. Screw it. Start it. Do it yourself. There was never an improv book about improv for kids. Do it yourself, you know? So in that sense, I think that's kind of the overall message. Is like, just DIY, my friends.
Couldn't agree more. So, we have a very similar mindset, I must say. It's good to know.
No doubt. I think that's why we get along, to be honest.
Probably.
Since I met you, there's a lot of similarities. I dig that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like your work ethic. I think I can really respect that. I just like that when someone works hard, especially when you're working with them. Because a lot of the time when I come in to think like, okay, nothing pisses me off more when I turn up to something. Especially if I've had to like physically turn up to something and I've made the effort and the people there like don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like it just really gets to me. I hate to be a dick, but like be prepared. Do your work. Put the work in. Don't waste people's time.
To your point, because effort usually leads to preparedness. You know, it's like, but I'm with you, right? I mean, I knew that today we talked, this was going to be a video podcast.
Right.
So what did I do? I made sure that my morning was started. I showered. I had my very cool button-down WrestleMania shirt on for you.
It's a great shirt, by the way.
There's an effort to exactly your point. Thank you. I wish I got paid for telling you that, but hey, it's still a nice shirt. But yeah, I agree. There's nothing that makes me more bonkers than showing up to a place. You know, this happened a lot doing live comedy shows, showing up to a venue and none of the seats are ready, or showing up to a venue and none of the lighting or the sound guy isn't there. It's like, hello, can we get our shit together?
Oh man.
And for me, that's really my OCD, right? Like I have to have that stuff in line for me to feel at peace to be able to create a show. You know,
Nothing
if
pissed
I'm
me
a
off
neurotic
more.
mess, it's gonna read.
When I used to like gig back in the day with the metal bands I was in back in the day, like there was one point where I was touring for about regularly gigging for about 3 years in a row, all around London and the surrounding areas. And there would be so many times when we show up and like, I don't know, sound engineer is just terrible. And like sometimes they do this really, there was this really awkward thing they would do sometimes, which it would just give you an example of something that's ridiculous, right? You turn up way ahead of time. Like if the show is at like, I don't know, doors open at 9, yeah, you're probably there at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. That's the reality of the situation. And so you got all this time to prepare, to do sound checks, right? And sometimes they like to do sound checks for whatever reason where you play a whole song, right? I don't know why. It's really weird, but they like to do that. Depends on the sound engineer. But there is these times when it's so awkward, right? So let's say you're the first band on, right? You do your sound check, but like people have arrived, doors have opened. So there's people there.
I know this all too well.
Yeah, and they think that that's like the gig, and then they're clapping, and then, but that's a song from your set, right? So it's just awkward because you stop playing, you just walk off and you go sit somewhere, and then nothing happens for like 45 minutes, and everyone's kind of looking around like, oh, that's weird. And then the gig starts and you get back on stage and then maybe you play that song. I don't know. But it's like,
yep.
It's
so true. That's the worst. It happens in comedy too, right? Like you're like doing your opening bit or your opening number because you're doing a sound check and like people are walking in. You're like, this is like the gold that no one needs to see. If we did this hours ago, no one would have saw this, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally hear that.
That's why, I suppose with comedy, that's why you got to like have a set where you just walk around ripping like everyone in the audience, because then it doesn't matter so much if like all your material, like you got planned material, because you can just freestyle and just rip the shit out of everyone in the crowd.
That is true. The one thing I will tell you, so I tend to improvise most of my shows, but I tend to not go to the audience. And here's why I say that. A lot of comedians go that route. And I tend to not, and here's why I say that, unless they're assholes, right? That's easy. But these are the people on your side, right? If you want these people laughing at you, they got to be on your side. So you got to make sure to, if you're going to go down that route to what you're saying is, go down the route of the guy who's heckling you, right? I love taking a heckler down.
Since we're talking about comedy, actually, I was going to ask you about this later, but let's talk about it now. I've seen comedians bomb, and I think I was always kind of fair to this because I've seen, bands have a bad gig. I've had a bad show. Everyone's had a bad show. So you appreciate it in a different way when you've kind of experienced something similar. But bombing in a comedy show is kind of unique because while with a band, if you have a bad song or a bad gig, you walk off, no one cares. It's a bad show, and the next time you do better, right? But with comedy, it's like, it's just you. It's a quiet room. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, if I would fuck up in like a metal song, for instance, I could hide that with like, let's say I forget a lyric, I could just like scream or something and it works, right? But you can't do that with comedy. I mean, you could try and freestyle, you can see if something works, but if you're bombing, you're bombing, right? Like, totally. Before I get to my question for you, I just want to quickly tell this because I don't know if I've ever told this before, this story. I was at a comedy show back in, I don't know, 2013 or something. It was part of a work thing. We got to see a bunch of comedians, didn't know any of them. One of them actually was an up-and-coming comedian who then went on to like TV shows and stuff. So it was kind of cool. But the first guy that came on, it's bad. He was Scottish. And normally, Scottish and comedy go together like bread and butter. It's just c'est magnifique. But for whatever reason, this gentleman was not funny. It started off kind of like light humor. And this is the thing, right? So he wasn't actually the first comedian. The first comedian that came on bombed as well, but it was a different kind of bomb. Because it kind of, he did that thing that people do where they run on stage and they're like, hey, and like everyone's kind of like clapping and laughing for like a minute, and then it gets like silent and they're still trying to do that, and you're like, shut the fuck up, what are you doing? Like, you can't read the room. You know what I mean? And he just, after that, it just died a death. And there were like a few light laughs here and there, and that's why I say it didn't completely bomb, because it was like light polite clap afterwards. No one hates him, whereas the guy that came on that did bomb, he made the whole crowd turn on him. And bear in mind, we all know each other. We're a work group, right? And this is for us specifically. There's no one from the street. It's just us, private show. So if you attack someone in the audience, like this guy does, we're going to defend each other and be like, what the fuck's your problem, mate? And this is what happened. This guy kept telling this really awful, he was doing this bit about Hitler, which normally would be
always a good hit.
Yeah, it's like, it's dark humor. There's lots to be, if you do it well, it's funny, right? But for whatever reason, he just kept saying, I'm not going to say the word, but he kept sort of saying about how Hitler was like a see you next Tuesday. And for whatever reason, I think it was a combination of his delivery and the fact that there was like a light laugh initially, but he kept pushing it, trying to elicit a certain reaction, I think, because I think he wanted to kind of go into something else with it. But because it didn't work the first time and he kept pushing it, we were just getting restless. It's like, what are you trying to do, mate? It's not funny. And someone in the crowd just kind of said, like, he was one of my assistant managers at the time. He was like, it's not funny, mate. And so he starts attacking this guy, like, oh, you bald twat, what's wrong with you? And the guy is just sitting in the audience, just like, well, you're not funny. Like, you can tap me all you want, but you're terrible. And so it turns into this thing where the comedian starts having a go at us and like going, oh, you're the worst crowd I've ever played to, and you're all awful, blah, blah, blah. And we just booed him off stage. And it was bad. It was brutal. But he really did deserve it. And I don't normally say that, because with bombing normally in comedy, it just happens. It happens even to the very best comedians, and you get through it and you get over it. But sometimes in these unique situations, you do deserve it if you're an ass. So on that note, did you ever bomb? And if so, talk us through what happens. Share your
oh, for sure. I mean, if you're any sort of performer, you've probably bombed on some level.
Yes.
And for me, a lot of my shows, like I said, is improvised. So one thing, especially in my early days doing comedy, there was this immense pressure to get a laugh. There was this immense pressure to get that instant gratification for the audience. And what that did for me was took me out of the moment. And what I mean by that is, if I'm in an improv scene, traditional scene, and someone says a line of dialogue to me, and I may respond to that line of dialogue as an example. If I think for 1 second, as opposed to answering the dialogue, is this going to be funny? Is the audience going to laugh? If they don't, am I going to be a fool? Now I've taken myself 1, 2, 3, 4 steps away from the moment of just responding.
Yeah. And
that happens in stand-up too, right? We get so shell-shocked by a moment that you lose track, right? It's like, oh my God, they're attacking me. Oh my goodness, this. Oh my goodness, this. And now you've taken yourself 4 moments out of the moment, as opposed to just laughing. One thing I do when I bomb, and it really speaks to who I am, I'll say it. You may have seen it on my live Twitches too. I'm like, well, this is a fucking shit show, isn't it? At least we can all agree on that, huh? And I poke fun at myself because, again, it's back to what I was talking about. If anyone knows I'm bombing, it's going to be the dude who's probably most harsh on himself, right? Which is a performer leaving the stage. So that's typically my tactic, and that has worked well. In my early days, I can think of a lot of bad jokes that I may have made, or things like that, which actually which reminds me of something I was thinking about earlier when you were speaking, is kind of the timing in which we are doing our creativity now, right? I think about if I had a YouTube channel or a podcast, even 10 years ago, I would not be performing on the level that I am today, right? And I think that's all the lessons we've learned. And I thank my lucky stars for that I was in front of a live audience for some of my shitty jokes, as opposed to online, because I think that it's a different thing, right? There's max 60 to 150 people when I was doing those shows, who remember that one show. And if you're not big time enough, people are going to forgive you and see you next time. But that's one thing you hit on comedy. I think it's really fascinating because it's one of the few arts we have that the audience sits, myself included. When a comedian jumps on stage, what do? We say, make me laugh. Like, that's literally what we make them do. And think about that immense pressure in comparison to any other art. Music is similar, right? Entertain me. But that's different than make me laugh. Like, literally, your job is to make me haha. That is because comedy is subjective. So that's also a really interesting science.
But do you know what I will say on this? I agree with you, but I do think that I don't know, I think it's somehow different to like things like music, because I've seen live shows, right? And this is bizarre. Okay, so I've seen plenty of gigs over my years, over my time listening to music. And when I became a musician, I started listening to music differently. And now I can never see a live show without looking at it through this lens because of being a musician. It's kind of ruined it, but it's for me, but it's great at the same time. It's weird. But if I see a band bomb, I can tell. And I look at the rest of the crowd who probably mostly aren't musicians and they seem to love it. And I'm like, okay. But then, as you said, with comedy, it's different. Like, yeah, it's like everyone kind of comes in with seemingly with this attitude of like, well, yeah, make me laugh. Like, who are you? How can you make me laugh? Kind of thing, which implies that, there's like a highbrow audience. There's like a high expectation already. But then sometimes you have a crowd, like I've seen so many comedians where what they're saying is, to me, is just not funny. It's like, not bad. It's just, I don't know, if you've got a very basic humor, then it's like, haha, like if you just come on and do like fart jokes, for instance. I mean, for me, I think fart jokes can be funny if they're clever and told well. But ultimately, if it is just like a standard fart joke, I don't know. I like my humor a bit more complex. But then again, that speaks to your point before about different tastes being subjective. Doesn't mean that if I don't find it funny that it isn't funny, and so on. So that's why I think that comedy kind of stands alone and is different to other mediums, because it's like, and it's this other thing of like with music, because it's so loud, right? Even if a few people are screaming, shouting, and like maybe not the whole venue, you can still hear that, right? And if not, you can just drown it out with the music, right? But with comedy, you can't do that. So
that's right.
And that's the thing, like you could have everyone laughing or only a few people laughing or no one laughing. So it's like just extreme after extreme. And like each of them, like largely the crowd, determines the show. You could have just done the best comedy set ever, but if the crowd ain't laughing, then I guess it's...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, and I think you're right, setting the right expectation for the audience too. Because there's different types of comedy, right? Mine is very similar to Whoopi Goldberg's, and it's very storytelling, right?
Cool.
And so my kind of where I was going earlier with that is my initial goal in comedy was to get people to laugh. That was my only intention. I want you to laugh. But you know what? I actually love when I have an audience member who's like this. Ooh, tell me more about that. Or so disgusted at a way something was perceived, or like, ew, he couldn't have just said that.
Yeah.
And I really love reactions, because I don't think laughter is fun for 30 minutes straight. Yes, I think it's good times, but I really love captivating people in a story, of making people feel stuff. That's fun. You know, we were, in my storytelling is very similar to when we talked about heart failure, right? It's a very serious subject, but there's also a lot of humor in what we do, right? I mean, there's a lot of really funny moments that I was going through in heart failure, you know? And so I think that that's kind of the key to comedy. But yeah, it's all of that is subjective. And I think you just got to do what you love and do what you're passionate about. And
I got to say, reads, hopefully. I couldn't agree with you more. Like, for me personally, I think the greatest of all time, I mean, there's quite a few still, but for me right now, it's got to be Dave Chappelle. And the reason that I say that is that he does exactly what you're saying, where he goes out and he doesn't even necessarily like do jokes or whatever. Like he'll just talk. This is what I am amazed by him. It's so much more than comedy. Like, I'm just fascinated by the concept of like, he can just go out and talk. Like, I sometimes look at that and think like, I could do that. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I could do that. And the thing is, like, you know that he's worked on that a long time, but now he's in like this kind of godlike, and I know this is crazy that I'm saying this, but if you watch his comedy now, you'll see what I mean. Like, if you're not familiar with Dave Chappelle, go check his stuff out. In particular, watch the show that he did recently that was sort of the first, I think, official show in the States, like post-COVID. Well, I know we're still in COVID-19 right now, but it's like the first proper show that's happened with an audience, but obviously measures were taken, blah, blah, blah. But this was directly after everything that happened with George Floyd. And I was immediately intrigued, because I was like, right, this is a very serious subject. How's he going to make this funny? Like, you can't make this funny. But he found a way. But he did exactly what you were saying. He came on and he spoke at length. He told stories. He got serious, like really serious, made you think. And then he flips it and makes you laugh. But I think crucially as well, he doesn't make you feel bad for laughing either. Like, it's that sort of like clever humor where he drops it here and there. And like, yeah, every comedian has their own style, but like what you said, like you never have a show where you're just laughing continuously for 30 minutes. And I've seen shows like that, but that's just TV and editing. That's not actually real life. Like, real life at a show, it's like, ha ha ha, and then no laughing for like 5 minutes, and then more ha ha ha, and then, but sometimes it does escalate. I don't know, but like in Estonia, funnily enough, I saw a lot of excellent comedians, and there were some that I got like, you know, you get that sort of laughing where it laughs so much that your face hurts and you're like, please stop making me laugh, it's painful. But yeah, anyway, I just actually on that topic, because I want to bring it back to you, I'll try not to go off on too many tangents. Who are your main inspirations as a comedian? Who do you look to, or who kind of inspired you to become a comedian?
Without question, Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg, who I actually had the honor of meeting a little over a year and a half ago in New York City for a press junket. Such an amazing experience meeting her. But Whoopi Goldberg is one of my... Go ahead.
Okay, so I've just learnt this term recently, press junket. That's, for those who don't know, it's essentially like a little interview. You ask them about their latest project or whatever. How did that come to be? What was the situation there that you were interviewing her for?
So I was actually working with my friend Chris as a producer for one of his segments. He's a TV personality out here in the States. And so he knows Whoopi is an idol of mine. And so he tapped into me and said, hey, listen, we have this junket this weekend. I was informed on a Thursday that the junket was happening on a Saturday, Sunday. And so keep in mind, this was a flight from Denver to New York City. So this was a big undertaking to get there. And sure enough, I left at a midnight flight Friday, arrived in New York City about 6 a.m. The junket was at 10 a.m.
Holy cow.
I have some really cool pictures, a little plug on my Instagram if you go to Jon Jon Lannen. Yeah, it was wild. And so that morning, we went to the press junket. I had the privilege of meeting It's wild. Tiffany Haddish, Mark Wahlberg, Tyler Perry,
Oh, wow.
Amber Riley, Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, just the who's who of these two films. And I got to meet Whoopi. And I think I'm going to be doing a video about that encounter because it was such an impactful experience in my life. And it's one of the few times that I left. I mean, Christian, I was sobbing. I met her and I was just sobbing. And I'll go into the story a little bit as well. But I remember leaving and saying, I'm okay if I die now.
Oh, damn.
And that is not something that, because it was one of these bucket list things. And I'm going to be very honest with you, and I don't want this to sound crazy, but I'm very grateful to be able to accomplish a lot of the goals I set out to do in this.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff is stuff we've already done. But meeting Whoopi was something I never in a million years thought was humanly possible. And to think that we manifested that. And one thing unique about the press junkets is you're not allowed to take pictures in a press junket for a lot of different reasons. But you're not supposed to. So anyway, I'm sitting on the wall and Whoopi kind of sees me at the corner of her eye. She goes, honey, do you want a picture? And
oh
Amber
my God.
Riley, star of Glee, she said, well, baby, why don't you sit next to Whoopi? I want you to have your Whoopi moment. And so there's a picture of me right next to Whoopi, and I mean, just tears streaming down my face in the press junket chair. I'm getting chills in the press junket chair where she's being interviewed for the film, not on the reporter side, on the side where the actors are. And
wow.
It was such a cool experience. So that picture is actually on my Instagram. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life.
I'm going to hunt this down afterwards, man.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'll send it to you. And like I said, I think I'm going to do a little story time video about it because it is one of the most cool experiences I've ever had. They say not to meet your idols, but I got to tell you, this was I can't express what a great experience it was meeting Whoopi.
It's so hit
and the
and
other person who I, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because you never know. You might catch them on a rough morning. You know, at the end of the day, this is their job, right? They're just pounding through interviews.
You know, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. I will say, like, yeah, we all have bad days and stuff, but how you treat other human beings, that has nothing to do with being famous or not. Like, I've met a lot of celebrities over the years, and I can tell you the majority of them have been stuck-up assholes, holier-than-thou attitudes. I've said this as well. Like, if I ever become famous, you'll never catch me like that. And I'll say this again. Like, if I ever do that, you have free rein to slap me in the face if you see me, because I just can't imagine being that person. And I've met so many people that made me feel like this small, just because they were famous.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, I can't wait for the day when I do eventually become famous and I run into these people again and like they're all pally, because I just have a feeling, because life is like that. And I know it'll, do you know what I mean? Because people change when they know who you are or what you can give them, I've noticed. Because I've had this, like, not even to do with like being a celebrity or anything, but like, you know, when people know that you are of use to them in some way, and their attitude changes if they realize you're not, and so on. And I just find that as a very interesting thing. So it's really cool to hear like when a celebrity is decent and nice. Like, I recently interviewed an Estonian celebrity, which for international people, that might not be a big deal. For me, it was a very big deal. I was extremely nervous beforehand. The guy was a total gentleman, really nice, and it went perfectly. And I said to quite a few other people that, you know, Estonian celebrities are very nice. And I think the reason is that it's such a small country. It's not very well known. So it's just kind of different. But when you meet like some of the world's biggest people, like, I guess they get into that mindset of like, well, you know, who are you? I don't need to treat you like a normal human being. And like, I met Bruce Dickinson one time and he was just a twat. Unfortunately, and that was really hard for me because I was right in the middle of a band. Basically, I was working full-time at a supermarket, like 50 plus hours a week, trying to make ends meet, plus pushing this band. I was really young, like 18, 19. I see my hero in the store. I want to talk to him. I wasn't like fanboying or anything, but I just wanted to ask him a few questions and be like, you know, thank you and all that. And he just couldn't be more offish if he tried. And it's like, okay, fine, I get it, but like, come on, man, like, do you have to be like that? Really? I mean, you chose that career. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just that's just one thing I disagree with personally. I feel like it's never acceptable. And like, yeah, sure, we're all human. We do have these moments where maybe we don't want to talk to people, but be honest. Just say, hey, look, listen, whoever person you are, I need, say, 5 minutes to myself. Maybe I'll come back, or maybe now is not the right time. But be polite, be decent, be humane about it. Don't be a dick, because that could ruin that person's day. I can't tell you how many times that has ruined my day and given me a bad set. Like a lot of the time, like I've had other opportunities to meet celebrities, and I'm like, because of that, I'm like, nah, fuck it. They'll just be horrible like everyone else. So it's really nice to hear that. Just going back to you, sorry, that Whoopi was nice, and that you had like your own personal moment, and that it was good. You can normally tell, can't you, with certain people though? Like Whoopi seems very down to earth. Obviously, you can vouch for that, but like, you know, like with certain people, it's like okay, for instance, all this stuff that's coming out about Ellen DeGeneres at the moment. I won't go into too much detail, but what I will say is when it sort of came out that she had this toxic work environment and she's like a certain way, I wasn't surprised, because you can kind of tell in a way. It's like that whole Hollywood thing of like, here's what we're portraying, and then here's the reality. And when I heard the stories about like the staff behind the scenes and like not being spoken to very nicely, I've seen that in real life. I've seen that happen behind the scenes on sets and stuff. And it's like, I mean, you don't have to be like that, because there's so many celebrities that aren't like that. But anyway, enough of this.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think you hit on the important point. I think the key is treat people right, treat people how you want to be treated. And I think that goes a really long way, you know, no doubt. And just kind of rounding out that last question, the other hero of mine is Robin Williams. I would be remiss to not mention Robin Williams. He is an incredible inspiration to me, but I would not be where I am today without Whoopi or Robin.
I suppose you ever got to meet Robin before, did you? Or
unfortunately not. No, that was one on the bucket list, but no, unfortunately I never got to meet Robin Williams, but was it still such an inspiration to my core? I mean, wow.
Was it 2013 that he passed away?
It was just an anniversary. It was
yeah.
The years are all a blur. I want to say it was, for some reason, 2011 is resonating with me, and I'm not sure why.
Wow.
But I'm not positive at all. Yeah, no, incredible artist lost, of course, to again, mental illness, and I think that's what's important. You know, you got to take care of you. You know, not to bring it back full circle, but it's true. You know, if you don't take care of you, no one else will.
Yeah, that is the truth right there. Bringing it back to your comedy, why did you get into comedy? Like, talk to me about the sort of the process of deciding like this right here is the thing that like we obviously I asked you about like your choice to kind of to do it and to pursue it, but like, was there a particular, let's say like a moment where you realized like this is what I want to do, or was it like like as you've said earlier in the podcast, like a series of kind of, I guess, things that led you to that? Like, what was the thing? Like, okay, this is it. This is the thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, it is. So the first year, my high school had a comedy group, and in my sophomore year, that's 10th grade in the States, they had auditions, and I went to an audition, and I absolutely bombed. Bombed. I didn't get cast. Nothing. And that was because they actually did. I was very involved in our marketing group called DECA. Anyway, I didn't go to the 2 workshops prior to the audition, so I didn't really know what they were looking for.
Okay.
And so so I go to the audition, I don't get cast, and I'm crushed. I mean, because I know I'm a funny person. I know I'd be a great asset to this. I'm just crushed. The other thing I'm embarrassed about is kind of looking like a fool. You know, kind of what you said earlier. I don't want this reputation of being not a funny person because I bombed this audition. So a year passes. I go to every single show. I really just digest it. And again, this is a lot of who I am, is overcoming the odds. And so I decided I was harnessing in on what was funny, the key words. Next year they held auditions. I went to both workshops. I went to an audition. I was not asked to the callbacks.
Yeah.
I was crushed. I asked the president of the club, hey, can I just watch the callbacks at least? They're, yeah, no problem. So I sat first row in the auditorium watching these callbacks, knowing that was my shot while the entire group was behind me looking. And I later found out I was cast. And I was later found out that I was not in the callback because there was a group of 2 to 3 people that they've already selected to be on the cast prior to a callback. So I had my shot. I was in it. But I still went to the callbacks because, again, this is how bad I wanted it. And my point to saying all that is they saw that. They saw the drive. They saw I showed up. I was there wanting it so bad that I got cast. And that was the first improv comedy group I was ever on. And again, the highs and lows. I wasn't cast my first year. I could have given up on my dream. And to think my whole life has now been translated because of that. You know, I have people from high school who, Bowen Yang, we did improv together in high school. He's on Saturday Night Live now.
Wow.
I have my friend who I went to college with, Shea Coulee. She just won RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars. So it's really interesting to see this art manifest in so many different forms. And it all happened from a failed audition.
What does it feel like? Because I've kind of got some friends who I guess are kind of famous, like not really. They're going that way, sort of. But right there, okay, anything that RuPaul does is like huge. That guy's got like a huge empire and such. So what does it feel like kind of having friends that have sort of already made that success and you're building it? I mean, we'll get to some of the successes that you've already had, but you're very much in the building process. But I think that like with you, the key difference is you're building your own brand and your own thing, whereas those people have gone on to like particular shows and have sort of amassed fame through that. And you know, success is kind of relative, to be fair as well, because there is a big difference between being known and being famous and being successful. And I think this is the issue that a lot of people miss sometimes as well. So just talk very briefly about like that. Is it weird? Do they still speak to you? Talk to me about that.
Yes. I mean, when we talk about ego, right, there's always an element of your ego that is bruised by the success of others. If you are a passionate creator,
yes,
there's other people who don't give a fuck. But here was the thing that
I wish I was like that, by the way.
Totally, right? But every one of my friends who've made it, and you hit on it earlier, you know, I would question that fame is relative. There's always going to be someone who doesn't know you, right?
Oh, yeah.
One example, right? You know, I published we published and sold 64,000 copies of my initial book. 60,000 kids and parents are holding my book. So on one level, your ego's like, I'm kind of famous.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. But the flip side is you can also be told you can walk down the street and not have one piece. You could sneeze and no one would even tell you bless you. So that's my point. Is fame is so relative. Like, in a kid's store, I'm probably going to be recognized. If I'm going, up the street, probably not. And so anyway, the biggest piece for me was realizing I'm allowed to be envious and still happy for people. Mm-hmm. Where that shifts is when I become jealous.
Yeah.
Right? I can be envious of someone's success. That doesn't necessarily mean that I want their success, but I want a taste of it.
Yep.
And that's one thing as you get older and like we all experience, like once I hit my 30s, it was like the path I'm supposed to be on is the path I'm on. And that's going to be different than any of my friends who are amazing and have made it. And just like I was saying to you earlier, some people make it in 6 months. Some people, like RuPaul that you mentioned, didn't become famous until their 40s. I mean, think about that. She was hustling as a drag queen and now he has an empire, but that took years, decades of work. My point is we all have a different path. And I think you reach it when you're able or mentally can handle it. Mm-hmm. 5-10 years ago, I certainly shouldn't have even had the level of fame I have today. That was in quotes for the people listening in audio. I would never want, I would have never wanted this kind of visibility for the things that I was saying then. And I'm sure the same thing will occur 10 years from now. Right? I can't believe that I wasn't on TV. I'm glad I only had podcasts instead of being on TV saying this as an example.
Yeah, no, yeah. I agree with you on this point. I feel exactly the same way because I used to get like that. I still get a little bit envious now and again. I have friends that are doing well on YouTube and such. But it's true. Like everyone's path is different. Everyone's time is different, and it works out when it works out. And in a way, I guess it is better to have a slow build rather than just sudden things happening.
That's right.
Especially with what we're doing as well. I feel that it's better to grow an audience over time rather than because the difficulty with just suddenly getting known is that you've got to like convince those people to stay. Whereas if you've had a growing audience that have gotten to know you over time, I guess they're more tolerant, more likely to stick around. I feel like that's the difference there. But it is largely to do with your attitude. I feel like that's a very positive mindset to have, and that's definitely the attitude I have too. So just kind of wrapping it up on the comedy side of things, you wrote a book called The Dollar Pocket Guide to Improv. So talk to us about this book, and so, I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious like why you wrote it, but just tell us like what initially led you to decide to write that book, because it's a small kind of little book that's kind of got like tips and tricks and stuff. But like, yeah, talk to us about this book real quick.
Yeah, honestly, it was the reason I did that little book was just a supplement to what I was teaching with my school of comedy, because I realized, I'm saying a lot of things and there's certain things that resonate with people, but maybe we need just a little thing to reference. I'm a visual learner, so having something tangible and be able to look at, I thought was beneficial. So that was the sole purpose of it. And it was a buck, so people really got cool. Behind it. And yeah, I mean, nothing too crazy on that one, just kind of having a supplement for teaching, just a visual guide.
So I mentioned before that, you've kind of had successes on, in your career as like a TV presenter, which is what I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast episode. So I don't know the scale of this. I just know so far based on my research, but I know that you're a co-host for the televised Denver Pride Parade. So talk to us about your experiences here, and also just your experiences in general being a TV presenter, because it's not something that we're all accustomed to. I'm sure it differs to YouTube and podcasting. Talk to us about how you got that opportunity and your work with that, and yeah, just fill us in on what it's like to be a TV presenter.
Yeah, working in TV is very, very cool. I've had a couple different opportunities, and the biggest, to your point, was the televised broadcast of the Pride Parade. Now, this Pride Parade brings 500,000 people to the city, millions of dollars in revenue, and is aired on most of the channels that you can get here. Now, that in itself was really, really, really cool to just be asked. And the reason I think that honor is probably the most important to me is because it's a community that I'm very close to, of course, the LGBTQIA community, which I'm a part of. It was so cool to feel, to be handed the torch to say, we trust you enough to do this parade and announce this parade. And this parade has only been around, right? I mean, it's relatively new. 1970 or 1975 Pride parades as a whole came about in the 1960s and 1950s, 1960s. So to think, like, there's how many people have televised that?
I learned that through. So, okay, I should explain. So when we were doing your variety show and you included your clip from this, I didn't know that. I had no idea that that Pride parades were that long ago. Like, I thought it was something that I guess came around in the 2000s or something, because that's when I started to hear about it more and more. But it's kind of fascinating that it's been around for a while and it's been slowly building to the point it is today. That's interesting.
That's right, yeah. And what we're talking about is the Stonewall riots of New York City, which spawned protests and riots similar to what we're seeing today in this country. And a year later, Pride was formed as a way to celebrate that and kind of those inequalities that we need to fight for. And to your point, it's grown amazingly. I mean, to think we have people like Wells Fargo Bank walking in the parade, Chase Bank, any grocery chain, the police force.
Okay.
It's just wild to me to think
I want to ask you about this,
are walking and supporting.
Being that you're part of that community, you're probably the best person to ask about this. Whenever I see these companies, right, it's Pride, and they're all suddenly like, we support LGBTQ, we're for this, and they change their logos and stuff. Like the cynic in me is like, yeah, BS. I don't believe for a second that you support this. Because from a business background, I'll explain why I have this attitude, right? I've worked in a lot of companies, so I've seen the behind the scenes of how they actually treat people. I'm not saying every company is like this. Depends how progressive they are, how new they are. But the more established ones, like you mentioned Wells Fargo's, that's a company that's been around for a while, right? I feel like they kind of do these things just so that they kind of... Because, firstly, if they didn't, then it would give off the wrong impression. People would ask questions, why don't you support this? What's wrong with you? So that's number one. Number two, it's a chance for PR. And businesses are businesses. That's what they do. But I kind of group it in the same category as, again, and I'm just being cynical. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just saying how I see it, right?
Lots of people with this opinion. It's great. Yeah.
Right. Because I'm a big supporter of LGBTQ, always have been. But I really don't like seeing anything fake or anything that's like not genuine. And when I see this, I kind of liken it to when companies do CSR and they're like, yeah, we really care about, our CSR and we do all this. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of companies that do this so that they can offset tax. And it's a well-known fact that if you make enough donations, you can avoid a certain amount of tax, right? So I kind of group it in that same category of like, they're doing it for the similar reason, but not so much for money, more to kind of like get brownie points and, improve their overall reputation. Like let's say like you have a bad reputation as a company, you can instantly improve it by supporting a particular cause, right? So
I think that's true to a point, right? Because you're always going to have opposition no matter what stand you take, right? And so I think that's a good point. Yeah, you're going to get all the LGBTQIA people who are like, heck yeah, but you're also ostracizing an element and segment of people who might not agree, which I clearly disagree with. But I do think it's interesting that you hit on that. Many people in the community have expressed concern about exactly what you said. And here's my take on it. The reality is it's about visibility and awareness. And when companies change their logo to be a rainbow, that is awareness, whether we want to believe it or not. The secondary piece to that is the funding that's required. It costs a lot of money to be a sponsor as part of a Pride Fest. And those sponsorships and those financial contributions, which, yes, to your point, get a benefit on the back end, actually help a lot of at-risk LGBTQIA people through organizations like the Center. So it's really interesting you say that. I totally understand the side of it being a PR tactic. But we would be remiss to say it's not benefiting people tremendously, including the businesses, no doubt about that. But these sponsorships and these huge corporate ties are what makes Pride happen, right? Are what fund a lot of these LGBTQIA centers for the homeless, transgender youth, to have free testing for folks on the poverty level. So yes, I hear what you're saying, but I think awareness is key and money is key. And if the only byproduct is people feeling it's fake, I'll take it any day.
Yeah, I mean, my issue more is that, they don't actually do anything. Like I like to kind of see companies that actively do something. So it's really good to hear that they're actually putting money into it and supporting the cause. Like that, to me, is the definition of supporting. Like, to me, just changing your image is no different to like when some shit happens in the world and you change your profile picture, like in solidarity. It's like, okay, but what are you actually doing? So that's positive to hear. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm a little less cynical now. So thank you.
But it's funny, I will say, I appreciate that point of view too, because like I said, this is a common thread even within the community. It's like, I can't believe Wells Fargo, as an example, would change this, that, and that. But you keep in mind, right? Wells Fargo might have paid $10,000 at this state's parade. Yeah. Then we have 50 states in the union, right? Now you multiply that times 50. That's a lot of money they're putting towards the cause. Oftentimes more than some other communities, right? But I think it's a really important thing. I think to your point, I think money makes the world go round. And yes, unfortunately, they need some benefits to donate. Like I said, if that's the byproduct, I think the funding is far more important than that for me personally.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Just there was one question I didn't ask you about comedy, which I can't believe I didn't ask, because it's only fair. What's your best show to date as a comedian? You know, we talked about bombing, but what was like your best show that comes to memory? Like, I don't know, best reaction. Talk to us about that.
Cool. Yeah, my best show to date had to have happened in June of 2018. And that was actually the first year I was the primary co-host for the Pride Parade. And we actually did a comedy show. I have this really fun show called Lip Sync for Your Laugh. And basically what we do is we team 3 comedians against 3 drag queens. And we find out who's funnier in lip syncing and laughs. That's really it. So we did this show. It ran for 2 years, and we did this Pride show. And we had 7,000 people watching the show.
Damn.
And I have never experienced that electricity. And I'm the host for the show, so I really set the tone. I introduce everyone. I'm this, that, and the other.
Where were they watching?
And they were watching in a venue, so essentially a giant nightclub. They do a lot of weddings and receptions there, but because the Pride is so huge, like I said, it attracts 50,000 visitors. Just for this Pride Parade. So now all of those people are coming to watch a show, and they of course have limits as far as who can come in. Lines around the building. And I remember just seeing a sea of people. It was the first time I probably felt like, this is probably what rock stars feel like. And the show was received, because it was in a nightclub, sometimes these shows aren't the primary focus, right? People are there to party, and you're just kind of you're just in the background.
Yeah.
We had captivated everyone in that building to watch this show, and we had 7 of us on stage, and it was probably the best show I had ever done. The performers killed it, the audience loved it, which in turn made me just like thrive in that energy. But that to date was the best show. The Lip Sync for Your Laugh, June 2018. I dream about shows like that. I mean, that was, and now, you know, especially being in the midst of a pandemic, I can't even fathom to have 5,000 people, 6,000 people, 7,000 people in a room watching me, right? I mean, it was really something special. And then of course it being the Pride show, because it was the night before I had gone on television, was really just really cool. It was one of those years that I'm like, all right, I'm going the right direction, you know?
Well, congratulations, man. That sounds amazing. I gotta say,
it was
awesome.
It was cool. And then the performers too, to give the performers that kind of venue, because for a lot of us, we're local or small time performers, to give everyone that opportunity was, God, it was so cool. I mean, just, 3 drag queens had probably one of their biggest shows. 3 comedians had the biggest show. I did. Collectively, it was very cool.
So let's talk about wrestling finally. When did you get into professional wrestling, and why do you love it so much?
I think that's what we were hitting on earlier. I love wrestling so much because of its innate ability to tell a story. It's storytelling at some of its finest when it's doing well. I found wrestling as a young child, primarily because my older brother loved something that had captivated me on a deep, deep level. You know, Yokozuna and Bret Hart, and then Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in the first ladder match for the IC champ. I was captivated. And then as I started getting a little bit older, people like Edge, Triple H, Stone Cold, Jeff Hardy, Chyna were so instrumental in taking me out of the place I was in, which good, bad, or ugly, and to be able to live through them. God, it was so cool. It was like when you get into a good book or a good movie. That's what wrestling did to me. So then, of course, I think we all kind of. Okay.
I was just going to say, so you make it kind of sound like you were going through something maybe not so nice, and it was a form of escapism for you. Is that right?
No doubt, yeah. Wrestling was a big form of escapism for me, dealing with a lot of different things from my childhood. Obviously, parents becoming separated, moving to a brand new country, learning the language, a lot of things that were really tough for me as a wee little one. But wrestling was great for me. And then I really lost touch. As you get older, right, There's this judgment that comes with wrestling. I used to watch wrestling. My God, it took me a lot of years. I would watch it intermittently. And most recently, the main event with Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania, I was hooked right back into wrestling. And it was a fascinating, because it was real casual. I was watching it here and there. Not to the point of regularity like I do now. I wasn't watching every pay-per-view. I wasn't watching most of the shows, AEW, etc. But yeah, that really recultivated my love for it. And now I'm, of course, right back in the swing of things. And I think the YouTube piece really helped, and it's also cool to see, and I know you can relate to this as well. It's really cool to see people we loved as childhood heroes go through things, right? Whether it be health issues, like I bring up Edge, right? Or even some other turmoil like Jeff Hardy. It's really cool to see them kind of triumph and return.
Yeah.
Similar to us, right? Like we've all grown up, we know different things. And now let's present it to the world. So
I got to say on that topic, when I saw that Edge documentary, I was like, oh my God, man. Because I was blown away seeing him at the Royal Rumble. Like, obviously, he was dropping hints for ages, and it was like, I don't know, the dirt sheets kept saying it was bollocks, but then every now and again they'd be like, oh, he's at the PC, or he was getting checked out of the medical facility, or he was training in a ring, and it's like, it's gonna happen, and then when you see it happen, oh my God, man, that was incredible. But I'm
incredible. Yeah,
I had a very similar experience to you actually with wrestling. Discovered it when I was a kid, randomly. And also I had a childhood friend, Christopher, shout out to Christopher, who got me into it properly. Like he kind of made me see it sort of in the lens that I see it now. Because when I first saw it, it was all like, chairs, this, swearing, I was very young. And then I got a bit older and he kind of introduced me to, like Rock Hogan at WrestleMania, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or Kane, and I guess I kind of got into the theatrics and the characters through him. And then I think the video games after that kept me in the loop for a while. I do recall.
Good callback.
Yeah, the video games were really, back in the day, they were really good. Things like SmackDown versus Raw, Here Comes the Pain, all those ones. Plus, I don't know, I would watch like Raw and SmackDown in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And then I kind of, like you, I just, life happens, you drop off. And then I got back into it about 2016. I think I was at university, and I don't know why I got back into it. I think it just kind of happened somehow. And then I started speaking to people, and there was all these characters I didn't know about, and I just got back into it. And then before you know it, you're back in the loop, right? And I caught up with a bunch of stuff. But it's totally changed now from what we were discussing there, those larger-than-life characters. It's, dare I say, it's more sport-orientated, which kind of back in the day was what it was about. But it's a cyclical business in many respects, and the in-ring product is changing all the time. But yeah, that attitude towards wrestling has never changed. And on that topic, negative topic, I mean, I can't believe that I actually wrote this question down, because I'm reading this back now and it looks... I'm just going to say the question and we can laugh, and then I'll rephrase it. So I wrote down here, have you ever received hate for liking wrestling? If so, how did you combat it? Now, of course you have. I know I have.
Sure.
So my revised question is, when those people would kind of give you crap for it, it's one thing, obviously, when we were kids, it was the whole, it's fake, don't you know it's fake, blah, blah, blah. But as an adult man, it's different. I know when I was in Estonia at one point, about a year or two back, I was filming a commercial randomly, and I got talking to someone about my hobbies, I don't know why, and I mentioned that I like wrestling, and his face was stunned. He was like, you like wrestling? And I really nonchalantly went like, yeah, like, sort of like, and like kind of waiting for him to say something, and he was just like, oh, okay. And then I was like, all right then. So like, as an adult man, like, talk to me about the comments you get now and how you deal with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was with a family friend a couple weeks ago. I said, and I love wrestling, and she said, "Oh, we know," and it's true, right? I think, I think there is this stigma that comes across with wrestling, but I think it's back to what you were saying earlier. Like, if you're just kind to one another, who fucking cares what your favorite thing is, right?
Yeah,
and I
but
think there's
okay,
elements.
just to cut you in there real quick, like that works with most things, but for some reason, people love to just attack wrestling. Like, it'd be one thing if you said, like, oh, my favorite
For sure.
band is, like, I don't know, Imagine Dragons, and everyone's like, oh, well, your taste is shit. But then that's the end of the conversation. Whereas with wrestling, it's like a fucking half an hour conversation of, well, but why would you watch that? And don't you know that it's not real? And what about this? And it's almost like you're a kid and your parents have found out you're doing drugs, and they're like, we got to have a intervention and talk about why this is an issue. Like, somehow I feel like it's different,
For sure. I think you hit on a really interesting subject, which is people's view of wrestling being an elementary form of art. And I think it's twofold, because I think it gets so much shit because it can't fall into each category cleanly. And what I mean by that is it doesn't fit into sports cleanly.
Yeah.
But I could tell you it's exactly like a drag show or even a theater production, but it doesn't fit into theater equally as nicely as it does sports. It's in this very weird middle ground of sports entertainment, which is what they brand it. And I think when you can't put yourself into it, right? People watch soap operas, which is bullshit, right? Though those things are hilariously nonsensical, right? But we don't really, and there's an error when people watch it, but there's not that same stigma like when you watch wrestling, right? And I think it's really interesting because Days of Our Lives is so specifically TV stories. And with wrestling, we know that there's elements of it that's absolutely staged and written and things like that. But there's also this marketing of it being a real sport.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that question cleanly, to be honest. It's such a muddied.
Yeah, but you kind of hit on a very important point there, because funnily enough, I made a video about TV. Oh, can you hear me?
I can still hear you. Yes.
Excellent.
Perfect. We've been going here for a while. Yes, for these two.
Yeah. So you hit on a really good point. Like, I made a video recently about soap operas, funnily enough, and I'd said how nonsensical they are and how it's crazy that they continue. And one of the things I said is okay, if you're talking about the ridiculous route of it, then it's kind of funny how, why would they live on the same street? And like, why would they continue to live in this horrible place where all these horrible things happen? And like, for instance, in England, we have this particular one called EastEnders, right? And basically, it's just a bunch of people living in a fictional part of London, right? And there's a really funny thing that if anything really goes bad and they can't be there, for some reason, they always go to Spain. It's like, oh, we're going to Spain. Oh, he went away to Spain. And it's like, it's ridiculous. And with wrestling, there are plenty of things in it that, because the whole point of the conversation is being able to suspend your disbelief. And that's why I always defend it, because I don't see it any different to like watching a movie, watching a theater production. You could just sit there and be like, it's not real. And it's like, well, it's not, of course it's not real. It's a story. And that's what wrestling is. And I think people fixate too much on the sport element. But the thing is, to say it's a sport is not incorrect, because there is a sports element to it. I think sports entertainment is a good way of describing it. I know there's a lot of people against that term, but if you look at what wrestling is at its core, at least today, that is kind of an accurate representation. I think the only time...
Yes, but I'm going to challenge that thought. What other sport or entertainment falls under the same category as sports entertainment? Right? And what I mean by that is you can define sports as a myriad of different sports. Entertainment. And I think when you pigeonhole yourself, I think you're exactly right. I think it makes sense to be sports entertainment. But is there anything other than wrestling that we call sports entertainment? I don't know of anything. Right? So it's nothing to compare to. So I think that's a really good point you hit on. Like, the name makes sense, But in the same respect,
for
it's
me,
kind of a monopolized industry.
it's only good as a label, really, to be honest, to properly
Yep.
define it. But I agree with your point. For me, the only issues with wrestling in terms of like nonsensicalness is just little things like when they do like an Irish whip, or do you know what I mean? Or like if there's this thing that really fucking irritates me, right? Where you have like one guy or a couple of guys standing outside the ring, and there's a guy waiting to jump off like the top rope or like over the ring ropes, and like they're all just standing waiting.
Yeah.
Right. It really fucks me off. And like I know it's staged, I know it's not real, but if it's supposed to be a simulated fight, and this is the medium with which they choose to fight, right? So sometimes they do it really well. Like if you have a good guy versus a bad guy, right? Like MJF is really good at this, the AEW wrestler, right? He fights like a bad guy, but he does it logically, right? So he'll wrestle a little bit, but he'll also be a dickhead and treat it like a proper fight and try to win by cheating because he's a bad guy.
That's right.
And that's what you do, right? And if you look at it like that, then yeah, the good guy fights the wrestling style because he wants to win nobly and skillfully, but a bad guy doesn't give a fuck and will just do whatever to win, right? And I think that's like how it should be. There shouldn't be too much of this kind of, I don't know how to put it, like nonsensical stuff. I've heard some of the industry guys say it, you know, because we're just fans at the end of the day. But I've heard people like Jim Ross say, like, you know, why are they doing the whole standing and waiting thing? And the thing is, I think there's also ways you can do it to make it like not kind of fake. Like, for example, not fake. That's the wrong word. To make it like logical. To continue. Okay, if the point is to continue to hook people on the idea of it being real or being able to suspend their disbelief, then you need to kind of make sure everything is logical. So if you have a guy standing outside waiting, right? I think there's two ways you can do that. Either one, he's bewildered. He's like, ugh. And then at the last minute, he sees the guy jumping and he's like, and then, you know, because I know they have to catch the guy. Right. I know that's the whole point. Like, but they can still do that and make it look like convincing, right? So that's one way you can do it. Or number two, I saw this actually recently on an episode of AEW. There was Jake Hager, formerly Jack Swagger from WWE. Now this wasn't him waiting to be hit. He actually turned it into like a power slam, right? But you could tell that he was going to do that. He wasn't waiting. He was like, well, I'm going to get this guy. And that's how it should be. Like if you're going to do getting hit, it should be like a surprise at the last minute kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yep.
I don't know. I
totally agree. You have to. There's some acting chops that I think lack, for sure, because that acting continues into the sports element. To your point, right? Yes, I know that the next step is to wait there until someone falls on you, but the acting component is remaining in character that you're in a fight. You know, I think it's really, really fascinating, but overall, I love professional wrestling, and
same.
Yeah, I just think it's a even better live. You know, I think it's a really cool medium to experience, and I can't wait for it to be back. Let me say that.
Me too. Which are your favorite shows and promotions?
The two big ones right now are really wonderful. You know, every once in a while I get into Impact and things like that, but I really am enjoying AEW's inclusivity with those things. And it looks like my phone is dying now too. So we're gonna probably have to wrap this up here soon.
That's fine, man.
All right, cool. But yeah, no, I would definitely say AEW and WWE.
Fair enough. And on a final kind of question, actually, because this is good timing. Do you have any kind of like upcoming projects that you want to share with us? Any final thoughts? You know, this is your time to kind of really plug your final kind of upcoming things and let everyone know what's coming from Jon Jon Lannen.
Perfect. Now, there's always, you know me, there's always stuff cooking, both on the podcast side of things and YouTube. Of course, the book is also being worked on. But one thing, you know, I'm going to speak a little bit in ambiguity because I have to. But if everyone could please put some real good energy and good vibes out. There's a very cool project that I am very strongly being considered for, which I want more than I've wanted anything in my life, if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, wow.
So all I ask is if you guys are supportive of me on any level, if you could just put some good juju out to this thing happening, because I think it's going to. I really do in my heart believe. But that's kind of my big focus right now. I've moved forward through a lot of the steps, and I can't speak too much about it, which I know is like, I hate doing that, but I promise I'll be able to speak to it soon. Let's just keep putting good vibes out. It'll happen.
Well, definitely send us a link or something when you have that. Obviously, I'll include all the links to your projects, or at least on YouTube. For those listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to the Christian Reeve podcast, like I said, it's very easy. Actually, if you type in Jon Jon Lannen on Google, he's done very good marketing for himself, so you can find everything on there. But yeah, if you can't find it there, look on my social medias and you'll find it there on the Jon Jon Lannen episode of the podcast. I want to say a big thank you, Jon Jon, for appearing on here. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope I did it justice.
Yes, no, it was wonderful. I thank you again. You know, I love working with you. And it's true. I mean, we can literally talk for hours. My phone's dying. My earbuds are dying. It's really gratifying and lovely. And like you, Christian, you know, anyone who wants to reach out on social media, I'm at Jon Jon Lannen. I love making new friends around the world. And of course, follow Christian. You all love him. So let's make sure to show him some support as well. But thanks again, Christian, for having me. It was truly an honor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone listening to the Christian Reeve podcast. You know, like I said, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to appear on the Christian Reeve podcast, please get in touch. I would love to have you on the show. I love to meet people. I love to do this. I think interviews are the best part of it for me. And yeah, until next time, all the best. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. One love. Ciao.